I have always taken a liking to reading these stories here. My favorite was probably one that was brought to my attention called The Smiling Man. While reading this story, it made me relive my own experience I've had while walking down the street with my father. Unfortunately, I'm here to share with you that experience. Growing up, I was raised by a single father since my mom had a lot of mental health issues and she eventually left us, living in a rather decently sized city in a less than moderate downtown apartment. My father, a young man who was practically a workaholic, in order to support me as well as keep both of us in decent housing, would usually bring me to a nearby family member to watch over me while he was at work. At the time of this occurrence, I was about 7 and still didn't understand how to take care of myself at home while my father was at work. In other words, I struggled to make microwavable popcorn. Yeah, I was one of those kids. It was the weekend and my dad was heading to one of his 2 jobs. Thus, he was going to bring me to my aunt's home, which was a few blocks down. We usually walked considering my father's job, as well as my aunt's home wasn't too far away and we couldn't afford a car. Let's focus on what happened. Don't remember the specific date. I think it was early summer or Saturday. Around 7 o'clock p.m. maybe. I'm in my Scooby-Doo pajamas, happily awaiting my sleepover with my wonderful auntie. And my father is getting ready to leave. I grab a movie to watch at my aunt's house, probably Blue's Clues or Scooby-Doo. We leave our room, lock up the apartment, and head out onto the sidewalk. Immediately after walking out, I noticed there is a man leaning against the outer building next to the door. He is smoking something and just casually standing there. He was wearing a baseball hat, but that is all I can really remember about him. We began walking down the road in the direction of my aunt's. We get about 5 feet when he says, "Hey kid, cute pajamas." My dad gripped my hand a little tighter and pulled me a tad forward, forcing me to keep stride. I was about to turn my head to look at the man, but my dad must have noticed because he told me to just keep walking. We make it to the edge of the sidewalk and have to wait for the light to change when I hear him again. "Hey kid, what you got there?" I felt my dad's hand get super tense. He leant down and picked me up, basically making sure I wouldn't leave his side. The man repeated again, "What you got there? I love Scooby-Doo." He then proceeded to make a harsh laughing sound in the voice of Scooby. You know, the high-pitched noise he does, sort of laugh. I dug my face into my father because I was scared. It was then after I was done burying my face into my father's shoulder that I saw the man a little clearer. He had what looked like pimples or scabs all over his face, a baseball hat shadowing most of his forehead and eyes, and a very large smile. Although I believe I remember him having what seemed like a scarred lip, or a cleft lip, I'm not sure. But I know there was something weird about his lips. I noticed only because of his enormous and awkward smile. It was after the light turned and allowed for us to continue walking across the street that the man reached out and brushed my hair. I recoiled away from him and dug my face into my father's shoulder once more. My dad noticed this and swung around, yelling at the man to get his effing hands off his son. He said some more things as well, most of which was language he didn't usually say around to me. I was terrified. The man slowly backed off. His hands were held up, a smile still plastered on his face. Still holding me, my dad quickly walks across the road and gets onto the other side. I looked up and the man was still standing there, smiling. After we had gotten to be what seemed like a safe distance, my dad asked me if he could put me down and we began to walk hand in hand again. We get about a block away from my aunt's home when amongst the usual sounds of traffic, I begin to hear quick and heavy footsteps behind us. My dad must have heard it too because he took me by the shoulder and moved both of us towards the building. From my understanding now, he must have just believed it to be a jogger out on the town. However, when I looked back, it was the man again, still smiling, hat covering his eyes. "Hey, you never told me what you got there, kiddo." My father had enough. He turned around, keeping me away from the man with a hand on my chest, and began to yell. I had never really heard my father yell like that. He is a smaller guy, maybe 5'9", but he is rather burly and built due to him being a diesel mechanic. The sound of his deep voice made me recoil and become even more worried. After using more profane language and telling the man to get lost, the man once more began talking. "I just love Scooby-Doo, man. I want to see if I can try on those PJs." That's what did it. My dad clenched up and laid the man out clean. No other words said. One punch and the man was down. Once my father saw that he wasn't getting up, he picked me up and basically ran the rest of the way to my aunt's home. He sat me down, explained to her what happened, and called the police, telling them there was a confrontation. I remember there being at least 2 cars with flashing lights that pulled up, but when I asked my dad about this story before writing this, he claims that they never updated him on whether they found the man or not. Needless to say, I still ended up staying at my aunt's place for a couple of days. I just remember that night, probably along with the following week, being absolutely terrified. We eventually ended up moving out of there, and my dad ended up marrying another woman. We moved into a quiet town where not a lot happens, and I am now in college. But after reading the famous Smiling Man story here, it triggered this story in my memory, and I had to go and ask my father about the blunt details of what happened that night. I'm going to sleep with my lights on tonight. I just want to start off by saying that to make this story easier to understand, I'm going to use a lot of dialogue. Obviously, this wasn't recorded, so these aren't the exact words of anyone involved in this experience. I'm just trying to tell it as best as possible, and I think it will benefit me and you if I use a lot of quotes. Just keep in mind, most of it is not direct. This might be a long one, so let's just get into it. I wrote this at 2 a.m. and I have corona, so I apologize in advance. This happened in 2015 when I was 16 and still living in my hometown. A forgotten little beach town in the middle of nowhere that's so remote, it's probably not even known by surrounding areas. Basically, there are 3 things you can do there as a teenager. Go to the movies, swim, or go to this pathetic little place called Miller's Fun Park. It's relatively similar to a lot of fun park type things, only a lot worse. There's a crappy arcade with broken skee-ball machines, batting cages that probably haven't been used since the early 80s, a pathetic mini golf course, and the most dangerous go-karts you've probably ever seen in your life. Seriously. Miller's Fun Park is on the edge of a field. On the opposite side of the field, about 3 miles down, is the beach, and across the single street are woods. If our town is in the middle of nowhere, Miller's is practically on the moon. Anyway, getting into the story. My cousin Emma and I decided one summer night that we wanted to go go-karting. It was around 10 p.m., so we knew it would almost be deserted, but that's the way we liked it. I picked her up from her house, and we made the long drive down. Once we had arrived and parked in the nearly empty lot, we hopped out of the car and paid for some go-karting tickets. The same people had worked there forever, I swear. There was nobody there except for a few boys in the arcade and a guy who looked to be in his 60s sitting on a bench near the batting cages. Emma and I paid him no mind, and we went to the go-kart track. Like I said, these karts were incredibly dangerous, so I was focused on nothing but making sure I wasn't going to skid and flip, as we raced way too fast around the windy track. This is why I didn't notice the guy walking over to the fence and why I didn't notice him watching us, until he pulled into the lanes after our last lap. He was standing on the other side of the fence right where I parked. He stared at me with the most unsettling expression, a creepy smile playing on his cracked lips, and his dark eyes gleamed. I managed to give an uneasy smile back, handed another ticket to the guy running the go-karts, who was obviously higher than a kite, and Emma and I went off again. This time I couldn't focus. The dude gave me the worst type of feeling. My eyes were constantly finding their way to the metal fence where he stood, unmoving and watching us every time we were in his view. And the thing that was bothering me the most was we only had bought 3 tickets. We were on our second to last run, and he was standing directly next to the exit gate. I was just praying he'd move before we were done. But of course, no such luck. Our last go came and went, and I had no choice but to pull in next to him, unbuckle my seatbelt, and get out of my go-kart. I glanced over at Emma a few feet away as I opened the exit gate to see if she was as scared as I was, but she didn't seem to notice as she bounced over and bragged about how she had beat me the last 2 games. I was barely listening. I opened the gate and the guy stepped in front of me just as I was leaving. "Hey there," he said. His voice was dry and smelled of smoke. "What are you cute girls doing all alone here?" he said. My eyes started over to Emma, who was looking at the dude with both confusion and annoyance. What?" she said, pushing past the gate so she stood beside me. "It's so late." His tone was as hungry as his eyes and reminded me of a snake even. "Your parents know you're out?" "Yeah," I answered quickly. "They're waiting for us. Actually, we need to get going." This was a lie and probably sounded like it from my tone, but I tried to push past him anyway. It didn't work. He grabbed my shoulder to keep me in front of him. "Nonsense. I saw you girls pull up alone." My heart dropped in my stomach. "You had? Are you heading out? Why don't I walk you to your car?" He starts inching towards me and I look to Emma for help. With one swift movement, she pulled me halfway behind her and started sizing the guy up. This was pretty dumb as we're both small, and though she's a few inches taller than me, neither of us is anywhere near his size. This guy clears 6'2" easily, but she doesn't seem to care. "Actually, we're just headed to the arcade," she said harshly. "Her boyfriend is going to meet us there." I did have a boyfriend at the time, but he definitely wasn't coming. He wasn't even in town, and I knew she knew this. The The guy's face immediately changes and his smile disappeared, and he was now glaring down at me with a look of annoyance in his eyes. I felt myself start to cower. "Boyfriend," he says roughly. Emma didn't give me time to say anything. She grabbed my arm and tugged me behind her into the arcade. The boys from before had already left, and the usual girl who worked in there was nowhere to be found. Still, it felt safer than outside. We ran to the back and hid behind the claw machine. What the heck did we do? I left my phone in the car, I whisper shouted. There was no way I was going out there alone, and pothead go-kart guy had already disappeared into the small ticket shack. "I don't have mine either. I left it charging," she said, facepalming. "We're just going to have to make a run for it." "Are you crazy? He's probably waiting for us in the parking lot." "What about the guy who runs the go-karts? We could get him to walk us out," she said. I just shook my head. "He's as high as Mount Everest right now. I don't want to risk running all the way to the ticket stand for nothing." "Then we have no choice." She stood up, pulling me with her. "Let's go." I swallowed hard, wanting to cry. I'd never been that scared before. There was something so wrong about this dude. We made our way out of the arcade, looking around to see if he was nearby. The park was now absolutely deserted. Emma practically had to drag me to the exit. I was looking every direction every second, waiting for the guy to come out of the woods or something and pounce on us at any second, but he didn't. Everything was still. "Get your keys out," she instructed, and I pulled them from my pocket. We were about 20 feet from my car when I stopped dead in my tracks. "What?" she whispered. I stared at the car, keys in hand. I had never locked it. I never locked the car, Emma. "What?" "I didn't lock it." "What if—" I trailed off, but she knew what I was saying. She started inching towards the car, and I grabbed her arm to stop her, but she pulled away. "I'm just going to peek. If I say run, you run." Her voice is quiet. I nodded shakily. She eventually made it close enough to see inside, but by the way she was squinting, I knew it was too dark to make anything out. My heart was beating out of my chest. What if he's in there? Or what if we get in and he asphyxiates me like in the movies? All these thoughts almost drowned out the unmistakable sound of shoes slamming against the pavement. My head whipped around instantly, and there he was, sprinting at us at full speed out of the woods. I screamed bloody murder and broke for the car, jiggling the handle as I realized I had locked it. Emma was already on the other side, screaming at me to unlock it. I fumbled with the keys, but managed not to drop them as I unlocked the door, flung it open, and practically threw myself inside. I had just managed to close the door when he was there, slamming his fists against the window and shouting incoherently. I was sobbing at this point, and barely managed to lock the doors as he went for the handle and yanked on it as hard as he could. Emma was screaming at me to go, and through my tears, I shoved the key in the ignition and flew into reverse. He was still chasing us and yelling as I veered backwards out of the lot and turned as fast as I could while slamming on the gas. I was driving like I was still in a go-kart, but I didn't care. I could barely see the road through the flood of tears, and Emma had to grab the wheel several times to keep us from crashing before I regained some composure. Though obviously shaken up, she'd managed to keep her tears in and be the sane one of the two of us as we drove at least 30 miles over the speed limit the whole way back to my house. We didn't tell either of our parents about this, and looking back, I wish we had, because there was something seriously wrong with that guy. But we were too scared of what they might say or do. I think we thought they'd blame us somehow, so it stayed a secret between us, something even we didn't talk about until months after the horrifying encounter. Safe to say we never went back to Miller's Fun Park after that. I urge you all to be extremely careful when going out at night. And to the lunatic who tried to do who knows what to my cousin and me, I hope I never have to see you again. This happened to me a few years ago. I worked second shift at the time, getting off at midnight, and would sometimes hit up Denny's after work for a late night dinner. One night, I'm sitting in a booth reading my book and eating dinner when I look up and notice a guy at another table sitting by himself and looking at me. I didn't think much of it since he could have just been people watching or something. We make eye contact and he looks away. A little while later, I look up and this guy is staring at me again. The same thing happens. Eye contact and he looks away. At this point, my instincts start to twig a bit, but he hasn't come over to me or anything, so I let it go. Finish eating and get up to pay at the register. He immediately gets up to pay right behind me. Now, I'm starting to get a little bit creeped out, so after I pay, I move over to the side and pretend to be looking for something in my purse. He lingers for a second, then leaves the building. I wait a few minutes to leave, cursing myself that I parked over at the side of the building instead of the windowed front. If this happened today, I'd probably ask an employee to walk me out, but I was young and didn't want to inconvenience anyone. I walk out to my car on high alert and get in. Suddenly, he pulls his car in next to mine and starts to get out. I'm really freaked out at this point, so I quickly hit my door locks and back out of my parking space. There are two ways to exit the lot. A driveway a few feet away going directly onto the service road, which would take me right past his car, or I can go around the building and cross over into the next door, Waffle House's parking lot, and exit through their driveway. I choose to go around the building, and this guy jumps back into his car and starts following me. I'm panicking now and don't know what to do. I don't want to go home as I don't know this guy, and I don't want him to know where I live. Now I would drive to the police station, but I didn't think of it at the time. Luckily, there's that Waffle House next door with a front wall full of windows and a parking space right in front. I pull into the spot, jump out of my car, and literally run into the building. I look back outside and see his car stop behind mine, and there's this just enraged look on his face. At this point, I'm shaking and nearly hyperventilating. The waitresses, and seriously bless them, ask me what's wrong, and I kind of stutter out that I think I'm being followed. One of the waitresses comes around the corner, stands next to me, and just stares down the car creep until he drives off. Then she sits me in a booth and gives me a cup of coffee, telling me to wait a while before heading home. I left about 20 minutes later, and I swear I watched every car on the road to make sure that guy wasn't following me. Never went back to that area after work again, though I did write a thank you note to the waitresses and dropped it off during the day. It scared the heck out of me, but to this day, the thing that makes me angry about it is after telling some friends what happened, a couple of them tried to convince me that he just thought I was cute and maybe wanted to talk to me. No. They didn't see this guy's face when I got to safety. He wanted to hurt me. Thankfully, he didn't get the chance. Before I start, I'd like to apologize because English is not my native language. I'm Swiss, and also I'm on mobile, so sorry for any spelling mistakes, bad formatting, or grammar mistakes. I'm currently 19 and this happened in 2013 or 2014. I'm not 100% sure. I was 14 or 15 at the time. I was on holidays with mom, my younger brother, and my grandmother, mother's side. We decided since it was autumn and fall in Switzerland to go to a warm country and choose Turkey for that. I wasn't used to the mentality of the Turks, so I was most of the time embarrassed when they talked to me. At least as long as I was outside of the holiday resort, at, for example, a market. When we were inside the resort, I never had problems. Everybody spoke English and was rather reserved as well, so more usual for me. Anyways, that was until dinner one night. Being Swiss, we decided before we went on holidays that we'd manage the tip for the staff differently, with Swiss chocolate. So, this evening comes. We are getting served in the resort's restaurant by a young Turkish waiter. He was very nice and always made comments to me. So my grandma decided that it would be best if I give him his tip. Not in the mood to argue with my grandma, I did it. But that was a big mistake. He then asked for my number and promised me to text me right after his shift and blah blah blah. I politely said no thank you since I already had a weird feeling about him. My grandma gave him my number afterwards. Thanks, grandma. So let the creepy thing start. He constantly texted me, demanding to know where I am and wanting to take me out to swim at the beach or show me his apartment. At this point, notable is that he was 19 and at the time 4 or 5 years older than me. I always said no and then decided to tell my mom about this. She just laughed it off together with my grandma as being cute and adorable. While he was getting creepier and creepier, he told me he loves me after just one day and told me that he'd moved to Switzerland for me since he has to do a workshop for being a waiter there and stuff like that. I started to notice that when I was at the pool in the resort, he'd stare at me from time to time. He even once ran after me and tried to kiss me. I swear, I thought my life was going to end when he ran towards me. As soon as we left the resort to head to the airport, I blocked him on WhatsApp. But the story isn't over here. He stalked me, literally. Found me on every social media site and texted me things from I love you to please unblock me. Calling me all kinds of names as well. Or I'm going to find you and hurt you as much as you hurt me. Just blocked him everywhere. And after a year of not hearing from him, I thought I'm alright. I wasn't. He somehow found my Skype, on which I used neither my real name nor my phone number, and sent me a picture of him at Lake Zurich. This is very close to where I live, stating, hey, I'd love to meet up. I miss you. I didn't go to the city for like 3 months. To all the people that are curious, yes, I told my mom and showed her the texts. Her response was pretty much, no big deal. He must be into you. And I am okay now. Got a new number and changed my looks a bit. Also grew up. So this was back in college. I had joined one of those freshman Facebook groups before I got to school so that maybe I could meet a few friends before actually going to school. I posted and got like 6 friend requests. One of them we'll call Jill. I get to school and about the 5th day of class, Jill randomly messages me saying hi. Innocent enough, I messaged back. She then wanted to meet up after like 10 minutes of talking. It was college after all and she was cute, so why not? We meet up in front of an academic building and sit on the steps and just talk about this and that. What's your major? Where are you from? And normal stuff. Then the conversation lags and we sit there for a moment and then she slides really close to me and whispers, "Hey, if you have any tension you need to release, I'm here." Whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah, some guys might be cool with that, but going from 0 to penetration in 30 minutes is a little fast for my taste. I awkwardly mumble thanks and say that I have to get going. Foolishly, we exchange numbers and part ways. Over the next few days, I get an absolute torrent of texts from her wanting to hang out, read sex. And it couldn't have been more of a turnoff for me. This was too much. I vowed to never stick my you-know-what crazy, and I was living by that motto. I told her several times that I'm not interested and considered blocking her number, but I had a dumb phone back then and you have to call Verizon up and go through a whole process that was time consuming, so I just settled for blocking her on Facebook and ignoring the texts. Then she started showing up at my dorm after class. I would tell her that I had to study and brush past her. I'd be in the cafeteria and get a text from her saying, "I see you. That red shirt looks good on you," and I'd whip around real quick to see where she is, but I wouldn't see her. Just really creepy stuff. She tapered off after a while, occasionally sending an apology text, which I also ignored. And then the next day, she'd send me a picture of a stack of condoms saying, "Look what I just found." Out of the blue one day, I get a crazy text from her saying, "Why don't you want to?" I ignore it like the usual. Nothing out of the ordinary from her, but then this came with a twist. She followed up with the, "I'm going to tell them you assaulted me." Stunned yet unmoved, I went to sleep. A few days later, I get a knock on my dorm door. I opened it and there are 2 campus police department officers standing there with my RA. They say, "Are you insert blank name here?" I'm not giving you guys my name. I say yes. They say, "You need to come with us." It was so embarrassing being let out by the police officers. Everybody in my dorm room was staring in silence at me. I sit down with the detective and my first sentence is this anything having to deal with Jill? And the detective says yes. She's accusing me of you-know-what. I throw my hands up in the air and explain to them that she's crazy and what's been happening and that I haven't touched the girl, and I go to pull out my cell phone and show him the text, but I left my phone back at the dorm. I ask if I can retrieve it and he reluctantly says yes. He probably thought I was going to make a run for it, but I wasn't under arrest, so he couldn't keep me. I get the phone and come back an hour later and show him the text from her and the sheer volume of stuff that's been heading my way from her hand. He kind of eased up once he realized I might be telling the truth. He didn't even ask, "Where were you on the night of blank?" which I thought was a good sign. They bring her in for questioning and confront her with the text from my phone, and she broke down and confessed it was a false accusation. Guess what happened to her? Absolutely nothing. No fine, no probation. Nothing if you don't count a no contact agreement. My school's version of a PPO, basically. I was very upset at that, but was glad that this big ordeal was over. For the next few years after the order expired, she would call me from various numbers, make fake Facebooks, and try to talk to me, pretending to be a different Romanian girl or an Asian girl, and I would quickly call her out on her BS. Now I hear she's married, and I hope on all that is holy that we never meet again. This happened a good few years ago. Some context. I was in my early 20s, single and living by myself. Most of my family lived about a 4-hour drive away from me. I was working for a small call center that provided, among other things, phone services for a 24-hour plumbing company, so they needed somebody on the line at all times. My shift ran from 8 p.m. to whenever my boss showed up to pick up the line, which was usually around 6 a.m. I worked in a building that housed several businesses of the same sort. Call center work mostly, though we were the only one that had 24-hour services. Because of budget cuts, I was the only operator on my floor. The only people in the building at night were the security guy who came by to do his rounds twice a night and me. Now, because the line had to be on 24/7, I was never allowed to disconnect while I was there. I ran to and from the bathroom, ate meals sitting in front of the computer, and every once in a while sneaked a cigarette at the window within sight of the screen. Only the light above my computer was on. Everything else was turned off when everybody went away around 10 p.m., so I was left in this half darkness beneath the spotlight. I desperately needed that job to support myself, so despite that crap condition, I kept repeating that it wasn't that bad. Things were usually quiet after 10 p.m. I could use the extra hours on my paycheck and didn't need to get a second job. I did a lot of reading, and I even considered going back to school because if nothing else, the night shift would afford me plenty of time to study. So one night around 2 a.m. or so, I got a call. I introduced myself as I always did. "Hello, you're calling so-and-so. My name is Jill. How may I help you?" The guy on the other side repeated my name and hung up. Working phone services on the night shift, you certainly get used to a lot of weird stuff, so I shrugged it off and went back to my book. Then he called me again and asked if he was speaking to Jill. I said yes, repeated the company name and asked, "How may I help?" He hangs up. The third time around, he asked if this is Jill on the phone, and I asked to whom I'm speaking. He hangs up again. The next time he calls, he's breathing hard on the phone and tells me he wants me to talk to him and he's not going to hurt me. I jot down his phone number and I start hanging up whenever his call pops up, which was the better part of an hour. This went on for months when he realized I was hanging up every time I saw that number. He began calling from a restricted number, meaning I never knew if it was a legit call and ended up answering. All the time this guy keeps saying he wants me to talk to him and that he's not going to hurt me. The one time I counted, I hung up on this guy over 200 times in one night. Every time he would call, I'd say the company name, and as soon as I heard him, I hung up. I complained to my boss and she did nothing. Instead, she laughed the whole thing off because this guy obviously didn't know where I was, and he was only a voice on the line and I was perfectly safe. Sometime into this, I started talking to coworkers, and here's where it started getting really creepy. He never called on my days off, when somebody else would be covering my shift. Indeed, at one point I changed shifts with a coworker to attend a wedding, and he didn't call that day. As time went by, I was getting pretty spooked by the whole situation and the fact my boss did zero to try and stop this. My coworkers were sympathetic and told me that if my boss did nothing, I should file a complaint myself, but I'm not sure I could since this wasn't happening on my personal number. None of them could really walk me home since I was the only operator on the night shift. Everybody else was gone by the time my boss arrived and I left the office. I got a little bit paranoid because obviously this guy knew my schedule pretty well, and even if I changed shifts, he would only call if he knew I was on the line. It had to be somebody who could see me. I started doing the commute with my cell phone in hands at all times, with the emergency number dialed in. Sometimes I did the whole commute on the phone with friends or relatives to keep calm. Since it's illegal to carry pepper spray here, at one point I considered walking around with a box cutter in my purse. That's how afraid I was. One day before my shift started, I was at the entrance of the building smoking a cigarette before going up, and I saw the security guy come by. The same fellow who usually did the night shift. This huge guy. I didn't really know him, never spoke much to him, only said good evening or goodbye when I went by his desk and whenever he came to my floor to do his rounds. I usually kept to myself and I never really made small talk or anything. I just greeted him out of politeness and he greeted back. He asked for a light, so I gave him my lighter and he told me he'd been fired and he was going home. And he went on to tell me that he always got the impression I was afraid of him since I was never friendly or welcoming. His exact words. Then he told me he was never going to hurt me and just walked away. I lost every drop of blood I had in me. I went inside to tell my boss the whole thing and discovered the guy got fired for harassing women on other floors, going as far as trying to corner somebody in one of the elevators. The complaints piled up and he lost his job. Most of the time, his shifts matched mine, so he would see me come in at 8 p.m. and left before I did. I asked my boss for that phone number again to come forward on this guy and asked the security company if that was his number. She told me she threw it away. When I told her the whole story, she found it cute. Then she asked me if I was sure it was him because a voice on the phone is different and maybe you got it wrong. Quality assurance told us time and time again that our every call was recorded, so I demanded recordings. That's when I found out that again, because of budget cuts and whatnot, the night shift was never recorded, so I had no evidence. Once the guy was fired, the call stopped. I didn't work there for much longer after that. So I work for a very major retailer you've all heard of. This was from a year and a half or so ago, back when I worked in the electronics and photo departments. One afternoon I answered the phone and spoke to a customer. He wasn't very direct about what exactly he was looking for. At first he said he was looking for a gift for a family member that he hated. He said he wanted it to be something they would accept because of the obligation, but would absolutely hate. I asked if he was looking for a type of gag gift, and he dodged my question. Instead, he started asking me what I would buy if I wanted to get a gift for a family member like that. I said I wasn't sure, but maybe a movie or some music they didn't like would be a good choice. Then he surprised me by asking what type of movies I liked watching. I said it wasn't anything that would really fit what he was looking for, as I usually watch anime. Next, he asked if that was something I'd want to watch over dinner. I said I certainly do watch it while I eat dinner sometimes, not knowing where he was going with this. Then he said, "No, I meant with me." I laughed nervously and told him no. Then I quickly changed the subject back to what he was looking for, and he asked me if we had a certain TV series in stock. I told him I would go check. By this point I was feeling pretty weird, but I wanted to keep my customer service and not disappoint the customer by being rude. So I found what he was looking for and then told the price and how many copies were in stock. After this, he asked me some other question about myself, and I told him that perhaps I wasn't the best person to help. So I handed the phone off to a male coworker. I walked away from the desk at that point and made my way back to the photo department where I felt safer, as I wasn't in the direct view of customers who were walking around. I took a moment to collect myself before I left. This next part was of my coworker's interaction with the customer on the phone. My coworker introduced himself in the usual manner and asked how he could help. The man said, "Aw man, where'd that cute bubbly girl go?" My coworker replied with an improvised response of, "Oh, she's actually our photo associate. She doesn't know as much about electronics." To which the customer responded with, "Oh, I like to see some pictures of her naked." To which my coworker did not know how to respond. The customer then said it would be easier just to shop in person and that he would be back later to see me, and hung up. I asked my coworker if he was ever able to get the customer off the phone, and he told me about what the customer said, and I felt sick. I was also so terrified of coming into contact with this customer that I went to management and reported the issue to management. They chuckled and said there wasn't anything they could do, as it was likely just a prank caller. I was worried about spending any time on the sales floor, but I still had to complete my shift. That evening I was terrified. I politely asked a male coworker to walk me to my car, and he obliged. And we saw no trace of the creepy guy anywhere, and I've never heard from him ever since then. So I don't know if it's a good idea to post this on Reddit. I'm a bit paranoid. What if he's on here? That would be a bummer. Anyways, English is not my first language, so please bear with my possibly very horrid grammar. About a week ago, this random dude added me on Facebook out of nowhere. I didn't recognize the name or the picture at all, and I was slightly confused. I don't usually have random people adding me like that. I had been at a party the weekend before though, so I just figured it was somebody I'd met there and simply didn't remember. Needless to say, I wasn't alarmed at all. It's like that nowadays anyway. People add each other after having just met once, you know. Anyways, it didn't take long for this person, I'll call him Albert, to start chatting with me. This is our very first conversation. Albert: "Hi." "Hello, who are you?" Call me rude, but I honestly couldn't remember him. "You're cute," with a smiley face. "Okay, thanks I guess, but do I know you?" "Maybe." I stopped answering then, since I didn't feel like playing games right at that moment. I have a boyfriend, and I was not having any of that mysterious flirty guy stuff. The next day I woke up and saw he liked all of my profile pictures I'd ever had. 15 pictures. He had liked some of my statuses as well. That was a bit disturbing. I know it's not a crime to go looking through someone's Facebook pictures and all, but it was still a bit weird of him to go ahead and like all of them. He wrote again that day. "Hey, what's up?" "Hi, I'm reading. What about you?" "Looking at you." Okay." Note: I use a lot of smileys. I never really want to come across as rude. You could say I'm a bit timid, even when I really should tell people what I think. I can really relate to Bilbo in The Hobbit when all the dwarves just storm into his home and eat all of his food. "You are really cute with brown hair, you know." "Thanks, I guess. I see you liked all my pictures." "Yes, I did." Okay, so I know this is probably something a lot of people have experienced. Random creepy Facebookers liking all. Random creepy Facebookers being all stalky like that, but what happened next was extremely unsettling. I was getting a bit irritated and decided to stalk him back. His profile had just recently been created, about a week before this happened, and his profile picture was low quality and very small. I did not recognize the man in the picture one bit. The profile said he was from the same town as me and that he was a couple of years older than I am. We had no mutual friends. In fact, I was the only friend he had. I did not like this at all. I decided to confront him about it. So who are you really? Why am I the only person on your friends list? He stared out the window and I saw Albert typing, but he never sent me anything. I waited for about an hour and then I wrote again. Seriously, I'm going to remove you from my Facebook now. Wait, can we meet? He said. I'd rather not. Why? I don't know you. You're pretty creepy, to be honest. Can't you just tell me who you are? I can show you. And then he sent me a picture of his you-know-what. I removed him from my contact list and told my boyfriend about it. He told me not to worry about it and that it was probably just someone pranking me. I decided to let it go. A few days passed and nothing happened. I had almost forgotten the guy when I got a text from an unknown number yesterday. It read, "I have your number, by the way." I remembered what had happened and I figured it must have been Albert. At first, I wondered how the heck he'd gotten a hold of my number, but then I figured he'd taken it from an old Facebook status where I wrote about having a new number and that everybody should replace the old one. I was hanging out with a couple of friends when I got the text, and even though I was alarmed and a bit irritated, I didn't pay it much mind. That's until he sent me a picture. It was a picture of my house. Well, my window to be exact. I live on ground level in a small apartment building in the middle of town. Therefore, I always have my curtains down whenever I'm at home. So, he could have actually seen me inside of my flat, but the thought of him knowing where I live still creeped me out. Needless to say, I cringed when I saw the picture, and my friends asked me what was wrong. I showed them the text and told them about him. They got really worried and told me I could sleep over at one of their places that night. I agreed. I sent him a very angry text basically telling him to kindly screw off. Today when I got home, I had to go home eventually, right? He left a very unpleasant surprise for me. As I grabbed my door handle, I realized it was all wet. There was a puddle beneath it, as if somebody had poured some kind of liquid on it. Confused, I looked closer at it, in my hand. I then smelled it and realized it was semen. It was so gross. I took off my hat and wiped my hand on it. Then I took a picture of the handle and the puddle underneath it. Guess I wanted proof. Then I wiped that off as well. I then rushed in and cleaned my hands several times before calling my boyfriend. He's staying here tonight. This is really freaking creepy. What do I do? The police probably wouldn't even help. Picture it. Hometown 2003. I was 25, a year out of college, working my first grown-up job, and I'd been living alone in my apartment for about 6 months when I arrived home to find my phone ringing. I missed the call, checked the caller ID, and didn't recognize the number. The area code was from my old college town about an hour away. I went about my business, but within a couple of minutes, the same number called again. "Hey girl, how are you? It's been such a long time." "Hi, who is this?" "Girl, it's Mandy. What are you up to?" I knew 4 Mandys. None lived in College Town. None of them called me girl all the time. None sounded like a valley girl on uppers. Mandy who? "Oh my gosh, we have so much to catch up on. So you moved back to your hometown. That's great. Where are you working? Are you still dating that guy from our high school? I so thought y'all would end up together. How are your parents? Where do you live? What are you up to tonight?" Wait, this was a 5th Mandy. Mandy Jones from high school. I mean, we'd been friends when we took dance in elementary school, but we'd been long since lost touch. Why in the world would she be calling me now? It didn't feel right. Hey, yeah, so I'm working at a local business in my hometown. What are you up to?" He said. "Oh, that's great. I always knew you'd be somebody. So, where do you live now? And are you still dating that guy?" Weird. I had one boyfriend in high school. He attended a different school and we broke up after a couple of months. Hardly a love story for the ages. "So, this is Mandy who again?" "Girl. Mandy. Come on now." And she continues blathering on, asking all kinds of personal questions, which I keep dodging. She kept wanting to know where I lived. Answering hometown wasn't enough, and what about the cute guy from school? "Okay, look, I don't know who you are, and I have no idea how you got this number." She repeated her name and said, "Mandy Roper." "Girl, I know it's been a while, but you should know that. We played volleyball together. We wrote this number in my yearbook, and I just came across it and thought we should catch up. All the red flags here. A few things you should know about Mandy Roper. 1. She sounds less like a chirpy valley girl and more like somebody who started smoking a pack a day at age 4. 2. While we did play volleyball and softball and all the other balls together, I guarantee that if you asked her, Mandy would tell you that we played basketball together. Mostly because 3. Basketball is the main reason Mandy Roper hated my guts. I was one of a handful of freshmen on the varsity team and, within 2 weeks of joining the team, had made an enemy of the scariest bitch on the team. It's a very, very long, silly teenage girl drama story that isn't relevant to the rest of this tale. Just keep in mind that Mandy would rather have told me to go screw myself with a rusty spork than have tea and chat. Anyway, 4. I got that number when I moved into my apartment 6 months prior, so I couldn't have given it to her in high school. So I told Mandy Roper as much. Me, you don't sound like Mandy Roper. I couldn't have given you this number in high school because I've only had it a few months and Mandy Roper hates me. She is the last person who would ever give a crap about what I'm doing right now. Who is this really? Silence on the phone. Seriously, who are you? F you, she said. Over the next week, maybe 2, I had several hang-ups at my office and a rose was left on my doorstep that my then boyfriend denied having left. I was literally clueless about stalking and harassment and whatnot, so I wasn't really sure what to do. After it seemed the hang-ups weren't going to stop, I called the friend who still lived in our college town and asked her cop husband what to do. He took the number and looked it up for me and then called the house. The most he could figure out is that it was a little old lady that lived alone and seemed thoroughly confused by the whole story and swore nobody else could have used her phone. My dear, dear friend Mandy must have been somebody close to little old lady though, because all of it stopped after he made that call. It wasn't until years later that I realized why somebody chose to pretend to be Mandy Roper. We'd played volleyball together one single year, and it just so happens that we were seated to one another in the team photo in the yearbook. We were both smiling in that picture. We'd simply gotten used to ignoring each other by then. So, somebody got their hands on an 8-year-old yearbook from someone I went to school with, looked me up, picked the person sitting beside me in the team photo, then called me and harassed me for a couple of weeks. I sit here 14 years later, still unclear on the who, what, when, where, why, and how, but Mandy Roper, please stay away. My boyfriend John and I went to hang out with his best friend named Mike and his current girlfriend. She knew about a party that was going on with some of her childhood friends who had just finished high school. We arrived to the middle of nowhere, a bunch of people hanging out in the front yards of a few homes, drinking beer and just hanging around. It was very strange to me and we felt out of place. People were whispering about us and pointing us out. I assumed because it was a small town where everybody knew each other. Some other boys started mocking my boyfriend's shirt. "You're a rich boy, huh? Think you're better than us or something?" My boyfriend was not rich and got a lot of hand-me-downs from his boss after he gained a few pounds, but we just laughed it off. After a little bit of just standing around, somebody decided that we were going to go to a friend's house who had a pool. We all followed, thinking someone's actual home might be less strange than just hanging out in random front yards. When we arrived there are some girls in the pool fully clothed. They seemed nice enough, just drunk. Some people are hanging outside in the driveway. I have a prosthetic leg, so I get tired if I stand up too long. I sit on the back of a truck. After a while, a dude approaches us and sits down next to me. I was pretty naive at the time and never received much attention from the opposite sex. Grew up in a small town in a different state. We were in Georgia, I grew up in Texas. The dude started telling us how he was from New York and asking me questions about my life. It was then that he put his hand on my knee and made a comment about my looks, saying I was cute or whatever. My boyfriend was there and I felt safe enough to not react, but my blood was boiling. I shrugged off his comments and laughed it off. I tried to act uninterested, but I was frozen in an uncomfortable state of weirdness. I had no idea where John's friend Mike was, much less his girlfriend, who actually might know these people. John is watching, waiting for me to say something, which I didn't. I don't know why, I didn't like the attention. The dude was not attractive and didn't seem like a fun or a cool guy, just an obvious drunk creep. His hand started moving up my thigh and I said something like, "Yeah, not interested, that's my boyfriend right there." He said, "Oh, well, that's okay. He doesn't seem to mind." His hand was moving further up my leg when my boyfriend grabbed him by the throat and said, "Get your hands off her." He started to get scared and was apologizing when somebody ran out of the woods and tackled my boyfriend. It was the owner of the home. He had been passed out in his truck for the past 4 hours, but had come to in time to see a complete stranger choking out his friend. 3 guys ran up on him and he managed to fight 2 of them off, but the host of the party had him in a headlock. He held him until he almost lost consciousness. They fell to the ground with the host on top of him pressing down his throat and cutting off his ability to breathe. I tried to hit him and beat him off, but he had a glazed over look in his eyes and seemed determined to kill him. I laid into him, digging my prosthetic knee into his back. John's friend was nowhere to be seen. The party host finally let off of him, and we ran to our car. Mike and his girlfriend were close behind, obviously aware of what was happening the whole time. The next morning, the whites of John's eyes were all red and full of blood, and he almost died. I really believe that. We decided to go to the cops. This was in a place called Rockdale County, a backwards, nasty country town. I didn't realize how terrible it was until we were inside the sheriff's office. They claimed that they had gotten a report that I had taken my leg off and beaten people with it, which is not physically possible. They said the only way we could press charges was if we went to jail because it was all hearsay. And the cop knew the attacker, family friends, and they would never assault someone unless they deserved it. We had to walk away. Rewind this time to the year 2002. I was in a residential nationwide high school, which is in Washington, D.C., and everybody knows that D.C. or any other major city can be dangerous. I was invited to visit one of my friends' home for spring break. I met with some local students, boys, and all of them were cute. They invited me a night out with them, and one of the boys borrowed his mom's van. He wanted to go cruising around Phoenix and show me the sights. I was the only girl in the group of boys. There were 9 of us hunkered down in an old Dodge white van. One of the guys had a brilliant idea of doing drive-by egg throws, so they got eggs and kept the van door open as they tossed eggs at pedestrians. This wasn't what got us in trouble. After all of our dozen eggs were tossed, we shut the van door and were getting ready to go home, and this is when stuff went down. I was sitting in the back of the van when we were at a red light. Then a silver Honda Accord pulled up alongside us. I saw 2 men in the car kept looking at us, and immediately one of them rolled down the window and actually showed his gun and was saying something that we couldn't understand. The light turned green, and the boy driving his mom's white Dodge van tried unsuccessfully to dart ahead or even dodge, and that wasn't happening with 9 high school students in the van. We were chased by this silver Honda Accord. We tried slowing down and speeding up and making quick turns, but no luck. Their Honda Accord was easily able to keep up, and it wasn't helping that the streets were empty. We ended up accidentally cornering ourselves when we pulled into a water reservoir entrance that had a dead end. 2 guys came out of their Honda, the headlights shining into our eyes, and they had guns. I mean real guns. They had 2 each and were using bandanas on their shaved heads. They were surprised by how many people came out of the van and were even more surprised that we were all deaf and were signing. They realized that we weren't throwing up gang signs at them. They just said, "My bad," and left. Being deaf saved my life. Recently, I moved out of my apartment. I simply had to because I didn't feel safe with my landlords. I lived in this really nice Dumbo apartment in Brooklyn for a few months with my roommate, who paid for most of the rent since her parents are super rich. Our landlords were actually this seemingly really sweet couple who lived a few floors above with their kids. The first few weeks were somewhat normal, except for the fact that every time I saw their kids in the elevator, they would scream at me before they got off and just run away. I thought it was really funny and cute at first, but then their eldest son came to visit and started doing the same thing, and he looked about my age. I didn't really think much of it since maybe he was just playing with his younger siblings. Shit got really weird when I bumped into all of them together and we talked for a bit. Out of nowhere, while we were having a pleasant conversation, the dad apologized to me, saying that his son might act strange because, he's a idiot. I was pretty shocked with him saying that out of the blue. I paused for a bit and I can't really remember what I said, but I just remember just wanting to get the heck out of this conversation now. A few days later, I bumped into the dad again in the lift. I was pretty standoffish, and he was just talking about how great my apartment is and how much of a generous guy he is for giving such a low rate. Then he asked if I could babysit his kids, as he and his wife and his eldest son would be at dinner. I said no at first, but he counter-offered, saying he'd pay $150 an hour, and being the greedy idiot that I am, I agreed. This is where I screwed up. When I got to his place, I was speechless. His apartment wrapped around the entire floor of the building. It was the nicest apartment I will ever see, that's for sure. About an hour and everything was normal. I was playing some fighting game with his kids when we suddenly heard the front door slam. I told them to stay there as I peeked to see what was going on, and I saw the dad falling all over the place, clearly drunk. He started walking towards me at the last minute, fell face first into the couch. I must have popped a blood vessel trying to hold in my laughter. I asked if he was okay and walked over to assist him. He then turned around, looked at me and said, "My wife will let us, please." When I tried asking, what his wife did was walk up to me, thanked me, paid me, and told me to come back another time. I just kind of went back to my apartment in shock, wondering what the heck just happened, and I definitely wasn't going back. I told my roommate, and she told me that she also bumped into the dad, and he told her, "My wife is cool, just so you know," with no explanation, and just left. At this point, we knew that we sure as heck were not renewing our lease. We didn't see our landlords until our final month. We kind of joked to our friends about how our landlords were creepy cucks. The next time I saw them was actually with my boyfriend, who was well aware of what they were trying to do. It was an intensely awkward elevator ride, as when they saw us in there, they just went quiet and smiled and nodded at us repeatedly. As we step out of the elevator, the dad shouts, "Hey," to us, and winks at me as the door closed. After that, I asked my boyfriend to stay with us for the remainder of our lease because at this point, my roommate and I were freaked the heck out. Our final and creepiest encounter was a few days before moving out. Our roommate walked out of the apartment and both the landlords were sitting in front of the elevators waiting for us. She said they started sobbing when they saw her and then begged us to stay. They apparently apologized for making us uncomfortable and said they thought we were the pretty young girls they were waiting for. She didn't say a word to them and got on the elevator and called me to warn me they were outside. And then they started to knock. My boyfriend answered and said when the guy saw him, he asked if I was here. Of course my boyfriend said no, but they tried walking in anyway. I walk out of my room saying I'll call the police if they don't leave, and they beg me to not and run out the apartment. A few days ago, we get a text from a random number saying we could live there for 6 months free if we just gave them a few nights. Of course, blocked and deleted. The whole thing was such an uncomfortable experience living there all those months, especially knowing they had keys to our apartment. This happened when I was 14. I was in middle school. The school was about 10 minutes away by car. My parents worked out an arrangement with our neighbor Jake, who was the same year as me. I think Jake was a normal kid. Our friend groups didn't overlap, so we didn't really see each other at school aside from carpooling. I don't remember the exact arrangement, but basically my parents would drop us both off at school together, and Jake's mom would pick us up. Jake was usually pretty quiet in the car. His mom was very chatty. I had no issue with that. She always wanted to know what was going on at school. I wasn't going to share all the gossip with her, but I told her generally things like how we had a spring play, how there was a science fair, and stuff like that. I would have about 10 minutes of conversation with her, and we would get back to the apartment complex where we lived. Then one day things got weird. Jake was sitting in the back seat that day. I was sitting in the front. His mom said, "I think you and Jake would make such a cute couple. You should be his girlfriend." I didn't know what to say to that. I think I mumbled something like, I don't know about that, and stared out the window trying to act like it wasn't happening. Why was she bringing this up? She didn't really know me and I barely even knew Jake. I didn't say anything more in the car. I remember just feeling a really weird awkwardness in the air. I didn't even turn to make eye contact with Jake. Figured he was probably just as uncomfortable as I was. When my parents came home that evening, I told them. My mom and dad kind of laughed it off. This hadn't been a serious violation. It wasn't as if Jake's mom had hit me or anything like that, but my parents said I shouldn't carpool with Jake anymore. I think my dad's exact words were, "You don't need to be around that." I didn't want to tell anyone at school about this. This wasn't Jake's fault, and I didn't want to make him feel bad or embarrassed by saying anything to him or go around telling people about it. I kept quiet on it. I stopped carpooling with him though, but I didn't tell anyone at school or anyone else. I barely saw Jake at school and we just walked past each other when I did. But that wasn't the end of it. After that, Jake's mom started showing up in places where I would be. I used to go to the park on Saturdays to play frisbee. Now I would see Jake's mom there. She would smile at me. She caught on to how I went there every Saturday morning, and she'd come every Saturday morning. I had previously never seen her there before. There were other examples like that. Also, Jake's mom showed up to the nail salon I went to. I had never seen her there before, but I saw her twice the same month after we stopped carpooling. Maybe this was all a coincidence, but I know it wasn't deep down. One day, she came up to me at the library and said something like, "It's so nice to see you here. I bet Jake would love it if you come over to visit sometime soon. You two should hang out more." I didn't know what to say. All I could do was give this awkward smile and mumble something like, "Yeah, sure, maybe." Eventually, I had to tell my parents about this. They had a talk with Jake's mom and told her to leave me alone, and that was the end of it as far as I know. It was just a really weird situation. From that point onward, we'd almost never see each other. I hope that means she stopped paying attention to me. I work at an outdoor mall in a great neighborhood. You would assume that it's safe as hell to be here, but then again, you just can't be sure anymore. There are creepy people everywhere, and I just can't help shaking the feeling that this isn't my last encounter with this man. I'm 19 years old, and I work at a kiosk that sells all kinds of wonky jewelry. It's usually teens, young adults, and occasionally some older adults that shop with us. Every once in a while, this man comes up to the kiosk, easily recognizable. Same leather jacket, crinkled corners of his eyes, one front tooth shorter than the other, and the same slouched way of walking. He is usually harmless, but wow, the last few times he's come by have made me feel so weird. I greet every customer with, "Hey, can I help you find anything?" And most of them say they're just looking. He always smiles at me and says, "Just looking, darling." At first it was fine, I didn't care at all. He seemed like a harmless 50 or so years old man. He always spent a very long time looking at the display and never bought anything. Most of the time I'm working the night shift at the kiosk while I'm surrounded by other shoppers and other kiosk workers. Mine is kind of all by itself in between two empty ones in the back. The mall sales have been going downhill the last few years, and I'm usually left alone. Mine is the friendly security woman that stops and chats with me on her rounds. She comes by every 30 minutes or so, and she's one of the few friends I have at work. The only stores in my view are a Reebok and a Macy's. A few nights ago, I was sitting at my kiosk bored out of my mind, and the security lady had already continued on her way. I had scrolled through Reddit already and was getting ready to open up Netflix and continue watching Terrace House when I heard footsteps coming up. I look up to see the creepy man staring at me, but not actually at the kiosk yet. I wave at him and he gives a little smile, but one that sends chills down my spine. A customer walks up and I immediately jump at the chance to help him, trying to shake the creepy feeling I had. After I had checked out the customer and written down the receipt, I glanced up to see the man still staring at me. Before I could say anything, he started walking over, taking my eye contact as permission to come join me. "Evening, darling," he said, almost doing a bow. "Good evening," I told him. He proceeded to do his usual, checking the display, not buying anything. Instead of walking around the cart, he stayed by the register where I was. He walked behind my chair to check the size, but never went where he couldn't see me. Then he started asking questions like we were longtime friends. "So, you got a boyfriend?" Kind of threw up at that because I've been single for over a year now, and I told him no, I didn't. But there was a checkout girl I found pretty damn cute at my local grocery store. "I see," he said. "Do you have any plans after work?" he asked. I was getting uneasy at this point, but I told him yes, I was going to a party. "So are you going to hook up with any of the boys there?" he asked. My jaw dropped. Whether or not I was doing that was in no way any of his business, and I told him no. He smiled a little bit and said, "Good, you're way too pretty for them anyway." He faced me again and came up to hug me. Till this point, I hadn't realized my heart rate was increasing, and it would only become apparent after I found it harder to breathe. Before I could actually do so, Linda, the security woman, walked up and glared at him. "Sir, if you're not going to be buying anything from this young woman, I suggest that you go loiter somewhere else." He stiffened at the sound of Linda's voice. She's a very intimidating woman, and he left. "You alright, honey?" she asked me. I shrugged. "He's always in here," I told her. She shook her head. "Let me and Russ walk you out to your car after work, alright?" I nodded, relieved that she offered without me having to ask. The rest of my shift is fine. I get through it and manage to make my bosses a bit of money. At 10 o'clock on the dot, Linda and her boyfriend Russ are at my kiosk. They wait for me to pack up my purse and then walk me to my little Prius. They wait for me to drive away as well. On my way to the party, I stop by a gas station to fill up the tank. As I'm waiting for it to fill, I glance over and see the man from the mall at the mini-mart. He's buying a pack of cigarettes and he looks out the window and sees me. When he does, he smiles and waves, holds up one finger asking me to wait a minute. I obviously don't. I yank out the fuel hose and jump in my car, booking it out of there. I take several detours before arriving 30 minutes late to the party. I had to make sure I would lose him before showing up there. It's been a few nights since that happened, and the only reason I'm writing now is because I'm actually working the morning shift and I just saw him walk out of the Macy's across from me. Linda has somebody biking around this half of the mall, so he won't come near me today. But please keep me in your thoughts, guys. So this happened a few years ago, and honestly is the reason I'm so much more cautious when I'm out and about nowadays. As in, keys between my fingers past 6 p.m. if I'm alone, and spray deodorant in my bag if I can fit it, as well as occasionally carrying a craft knife in my bag as well. Also, sorry if this story is long. I kept trying to shorten it, but felt it left out too many details, and frankly, writing out was kind of a bit of a release to me. I never spoke about it in detail with anybody. My parents and sister know the rough outlines, but not the details of what happened, I don't think. I had an interview in the city center, and I had met up with a couple of girlfriends afterwards. I was dressed nicely, a white blouse and a black cardigan, black trousers, not jeans, and some cute kitten heels. It had been raining, and so I was quite damp. You can film the Blakes. Looked like the results of a wet t-shirt contest or a car wash gone wrong. My parents had to go home, so I hopped on the bus that stopped essentially right outside of my house. It was late, maybe like 4 p.m. and in summer, so it was still light out and had stopped raining by now. I sat at the back of the house where you usually have 9 seats, 4 facing backwards, 5 facing forwards, so that the heat from the engine of the shitty old bus could warm me up a little bit. This guy Frank was already sitting there, but he was tucked away in a corner and I had headphones in, so I assumed he wouldn't talk to me or was harmless, but I was incorrect. As soon as the bus took off, Frank shuffled over next to me and said something. I took an earphone out and asked him what he said, and he basically said, "Hey, how's it going? What have you done today, Missy?" I replied politely and started putting my headphones back in, but he started talking again. This time he introduced himself and reached out to shake my hand. I gave him a fake name. "Thank you, parents, for teaching me about quick thinking and hammering it into my skull," and shook his hand. He wouldn't let go, for like a solid minute, and was very clearly staring at my cleavage before I even said my name. I pulled my hand away and he puts his hand on my thigh. This is where I should have got the bus driver involved or at least moved seats. Guess what? I did neither of these things. We talked for about 5+ more minutes. I think the physical touch sort of sent me into a minor shock, to be honest. I froze. He was asking me who I live with or would anybody be home when I get home. I lied and told him my butch as shit girlfriend would be waiting for me as she cooked dinner for me. I was super single, but he didn't need to know that. As all creepy old men on buses do, he started asking about our relationship. How long have we been together? Would we get married? Do we want kids? Would we need a donor? The usual stuff, really. While he was asking all this stuff, a young guy, Sam, who was maybe my age at the time, had gotten on the bus, made eye contact with me and sort of half smiled, then went to the top deck. So after Frank asked me, somehow line-crossing question of, "Will your girlfriend be waiting for you in the shower?" I stood up, told him I'd recognized a friend going upstairs, and practically ran up the stairs to the top deck, where I explained everything to Sam. He let me sit by him in case Frank came upstairs after me. The question was line-crossing for me. I think because of the way he stared at me when he said it. I vividly remember him licking his lips and clearing his throat and everything. It was insane. I got home about 5 minutes after going upstairs. Frank was thankfully no longer on the bus. When I got into the house, nobody was home. My parents and sister were all out elsewhere, and I tried calling them all, but nobody answered. So I cried and shook and threw up, alone, for almost 2 hours. I was a shaky mess even when they got home, and I had nightmares for weeks and saw him everywhere I went. Although when I would check, he definitely wasn't there. I never saw him again actually, and wrote in a report to the bus company. I think telling them the day and rough time I was on the bus, where I was sitting, and roughly what he and I looked like. I honestly got the creeps just writing about this, even though I've written about it briefly in an Ask Reddit comment in the past. As a teen, there was a place that a lot of people my age used to go to. It was basically a large park, and we would all spend our weekends sat there getting drunk. Underage drinking was our stuff in the area, and there'd be about 40 people from all over the town at the park. Close to the park was a pub and a small shop. I and a couple of my friends used to sneak into the pub to use the toilet because no girl likes having to be outside. It was a Friday, and it was about 9 p.m. It was pitch black, and I'd been drinking. And I needed a wee, so I walked to the pub. I just come out of the pub, and a young couple, about 24 maybe, came over talking to me, asking why I was in the pub because I was obviously too young. I told them that I was just using the bathroom. What of it? Expecting them to have a go at me, but they didn't. They were very nice and started asking me about myself, telling me I was beautiful and things like that. The woman kept stroking my hair, saying I was lucky to have such nice long hair. Now, I thought this was odd, but I was drunk and thought, screw it. They're just a drunk couple being nice. Anyway, the female suddenly said, "Wait here," and they both went into the shop at the side of the pub. I thought about taking off, but by that point, a few of my friends had started walking up from the park and were heading towards me, so I waited. The couple came out with a bag of things for me and thrust it into my hand, saying, "Hey, we got you some things. You deserve them." Inside was a bottle of WKD, a 10-pack of 6, a Kinder Egg, a huge pack of crisps, and a bat and ball set for kids. It was so awkward, but I said thank you anyway, and by that point, my mates were around me asking who the couple were. They said they needed to go, but smiled, hugged me, and said if I wanted more, I should come back next week on my own. Now, despite having a good time drinking and eating and then playing drunken bat and ball with my friends later, I realized how odd this encounter was. I didn't think too much about it though and just forgot about it. I did see them, but never actually went over to them. I thought they were weird, but week after week, I'd see them hanging around the outside pub area, always looking like they were just hanging out there. I ended up getting grounded for something and couldn't go out for a month. When I did finally get back out and went to the park, there was all sorts of gossip from the other groups at the park, talking about a girl who had been forced into a threesome with a couple that she had met in the area. I never met the girl, but the story was that she met this nice couple who bought her things and ended up offering her a ride home, but they didn't take her home. Apparently, they threatened her with things like telling her parents that she had been doing bad things, and since they painted the picture of being this lovely young couple, I can only imagine how they manipulated her. I haven't thought about this in years. It happened when I was 15. I'm now nearly 25. It was only reading through some of the stories on this subreddit that it actually came back to me, and it makes me sick to my stomach how I put myself in that situation, and how very lucky I am that nothing happened to me. I am always wondering how the girl is doing. As far as I know, she never told the police or anything. This happened literally last week at my new job that I've only been at for a week as a barista at a regional coffee chain. I was working a 6-hour shift. When around 10 o'clock, a customer came in and ordered our smallest coffee, sat down at a table that gave him a full view behind the counter and into our back kitchen and employee space. Originally, this customer seemed nice. I even forgot he was there as we were quite busy. However, as soon as there was a shift change a few hours later, my manager left to run some errands and would be back later, and another employee started with me. The customer no longer became as nice and polite. Immediately, he came up to me for a refill on his coffee and specifically tipped me a large amount and said that it was because of how cute and sweet I was. As I continued to work, he continued to try and talk to me nonstop, giving me very graphic information about his life, including how his elementary school was one of the last few in the area to desegregate while making not too friendly eye contact with my black coworker. I would just continue to ignore him and say, "Uh-huh," and "Oh wow," just to continue giving customer service that would not get me in trouble. I made myself a lunch though, and went off into the back kitchen, out of sight of the customers to eat. The customer then comes up to my coworker and tells my coworker to have me specifically make him whatever it is that he was watching me eat in the kitchen. So I went out and rang him up, and the entire time he was asking me about my personal life and made me feel very weird. After I made the customer his food and he went back to sit down, the manager came back from his errands and pulled me and my coworker into the back kitchen. He informed us that 2 other female employees had spoken with him earlier in the week about that exact customer making them feel weird. And my manager asked my coworker to make sure I got to my car safely at the end of my shift. I told my manager about the customer and how he had already made me feel weird by specifically tipping me just a large amount and requesting that I make his sandwich. My manager then finished up his things and left for good. As soon as my manager left again, the customer got worse. He then continued to tell me how it reminded him of a girl that he was chasing the other night at the bar. When I told him that it was for sure not me, he said, "Oh well, I wish it was." And from there, I tried to keep my distance and talk to my coworker. Out of the blue, he then informed me and my coworker of a young girl that he had tried to get with recently. We were freaked out when he said that and tried to ignore him to the best of our abilities. Later, my coworker asked how old I was, as I looked very young for my age, so I told him that I was 22. I thought I was speaking quietly enough that the customer didn't hear me say my age, but I was wrong, because the customer then immediately said, "Wow, you're beautiful for a 22-year-old, which, thanks, I guess. Luckily, by this time, I had only a few minutes left in my shift, so I was trying to hurry up my last few things to get out of there on time and away from this man. He sees me cashing out my tips and goes, "Oh, is that your blue Pontiac out there in the parking lot?" And I said no. and then he continuously tries to guess which car was mine, and then eventually asks me what I drove. I lied about what car I drive because that was sending out a lot of red flags. As I finally cashed out my tips and grabbed my purse to go, the customer then stood up and said, "Well, guess it's time for me to leave." I waited until he left before me and had my coworker walk me to the car. I texted my manager and told him what happened. My manager, thankful for him, said he would talk to the customer next time he saw him and he would let the other managers know to be on the lookout for him. I wrote here last month about the creepy guy on the bus who asked me if I had anybody waiting at home for me. Honestly, writing that out made me feel a lot better about the whole thing. So here, have another story. For some reason, I attract creepers, so there might actually be a good few of these stories still to come. Set the scene. I'm 17 years old, maybe older, definitely under 20 at least, and on dating websites because why not? I met a guy named Dave who seemed nice enough, and we get to talking. Get on okay and start chatting on Skype and stuff like that. All is fine and we flirt a lot and end up doing various adult activities via Skype for a good few months until we decide to meet up. This is where the let's not meet crap begins. This is long because of my sheer hatred for this guy. Pretty sure half of this post is profanities. Also needed quite a few words to get across how much of a jerk he was. So I go and meet up with Dave and we go straight to his house, which I know. It was a bad idea, but I did it. I was on my period and at the time didn't use tampons. Sorry, but it's relevant. So I had a pad on. Couldn't see it or anything, but if you touched my butt, I guess you'd be able to feel it. I think you see where this is going. Anyway, get to his place, chill for a bit, and nothing happens because it's Shark Week. Not that he knows this yet. And then we start kissing. I explain everything to him. And he starts making jokes about it, which irritates me, but not enough to stop making out for a while longer, till I feel him squeeze my butt again and laugh to himself. I pull away, stop all of it, and awkward bit of time later, he walks me to the bus stop. It was dark on Halloween, and there was a drunk guy there who said we looked like a cute couple. I almost puked in my mouth, to be honest. I get home and sort myself out. Shark Week wise, get into bed, text him a goodnight, and hardly talk to him for a while because he replies with jokes about nappies and babies. For you Americans, by the way, nappies are what we Brits call diapers. That should be the end of it, right? Well, it wasn't. We go a while barely talking. I can't remember any specifics from that time except we try and get back in touch via Skype, and he almost immediately makes things sexual after I've explicitly told him not to do that if he wanted a second chance. So I block his ass. He messages me on Facebook, chatting stuff about how he's sorry and he has ADHD. Undiagnosed, by the way, but he relates strongly to it or some BS. We go back and forth a bit because I hate being disrespected and get angry easily, or did back then at least, and I enjoyed arguing because I was a POS. Again, it ends up in me telling him to screw off, him refusing, and me blocking him again. I also blocked him on the dating site that we met on as well as any other site I ever seen his face on. A year goes by and I get a message, and I think I recognize the picture but I'm not sure. So I reply anyway to be polite. It's him. He apologizes and I argue with him again, telling him I really truly never want to hear from him again and block him. Again, he goes on to make several more accounts on that site to talk to me. Same goes for Facebook. I also run into him. Well, he messages me on Plenty of Fish and OkCupid. We argue a lot there, to be honest. It was getting really weird and awkward and creepy, and I got super mad. I'd grown some balls and learned some big words by this point, so I had to go right at him. As per usual, the chat ended with me basically telling him to screw off and that he's blocked, and then blocking him. I actually have screenshots of the OkCupid conversation, as well as text that will soon be mentioned. Things go quiet again. And then, after going to the cinema with my sister to see Batman v Superman, he messages me on WhatsApp. I instantly start having a mild panic attack, have to use my inhaler. This guy triggers me so damn badly. I hate his guts for making me feel that way, and I still feel that way when I see his pictures on dating sites. Screw him. Anyway, it gets to the point where I'm still telling him to bug off. I block him on WhatsApp pretty quickly, and he resorts to texting and calling. Most of the texts are him telling me to pick up the phone with the odd "you are worthless" and stuff like that. Charming, really. Definitely winning me back over. Bear in mind, it's been at least 2 years at this point. He's harassed me on and off for 2 years. Anyway, again, I excuse myself from my sister. We are in McDonald's at this point. It's a random weeknight and quite quiet in the car park. And I step outside into the almost empty car park. I start screaming down the phone. I don't remember what I said. I didn't even think about my words when I was saying them. I just know I told him I'd report him for harassment and stuff if he didn't screw off. I had to go outside 3 more times just to scream down the phone. At one point, I was literally just screaming. No words, pure pent-up anger and hatred for this jerk for ruining what was meant to be a great night with my baby sister. This is already getting too long, so I'll sort of taper off here. But basically, I blocked his number from texts and calls, and he still managed to get voicemails heard though. The knob, and never heard from him again. I wish. Got messages from him several more times, both on the original app we met on and POF, but tended to block him right away after that. My mom was young-ish when she had me, 23, and she looked even younger than she actually was. She had taken me with her to the local mall on Black Friday and was now getting some new work clothes. A couple went up to her at one point and told her how cute I was. She thanked them and walked away. A while later, she realized the couple had been following us store to store. She wasn't sure if it was a coincidence or not, so she went to the food court, which was right next to the security desk. The couple came up to her again and told her that while she was brave for being a teenage mother, she shouldn't waste her youth being saddled with a child and that they could do a better job raising me than she could. They told her they would give her $5,000 for me. My mom was furious. She was a single mother, yes, but by choice. She broke off her engagement to my biological father a few months after she found out she was pregnant because he didn't want to deal with a child right after graduating from college. She had moved back to her hometown and had an apartment near her friend's house, and my grandma watched me while my mom was at work. She had a very well-paying job at Ford as well. She told them she was not a teenage mom and that she would get a security officer if they didn't leave us alone. They got angry and tried to grab my stroller, and my mom just took a deep breath and screamed as loudly as she could. It worked. 3 security officers came running from different directions, and the couple ran for it, leaving me behind. My mom explained the situation to the officers, and 2 officers took off after the couple, and 1 officer walked my mom to her car to make sure nothing more happened. The next day, my mom got a call from the police letting her know the couple had been arrested after they tried to take somebody else's baby as well. They were charged with multiple counts of attempted kidnapping. It turned out that the wife was infertile, but the couple didn't want to deal with the work of adopting a child. They had been following around young blonde women with babies in the hope that the baby would end up blonde as well, as the husband and wife were both blonde. I know they were sent to jail, but I'm sure they're both still there on multiple counts of attempted kidnapping. At least I hope they are. How messed up do you have to be to try and pressure mothers into giving away their children? I headed out to my local mall a few days ago, determined to do some serious Christmas shopping. As a bit of a reference, I'm only about 5'5" and quite thin. I have a shaggy pixie cut and prefer the comfort of big t-shirts and skinny jeans most of the time, so I get mistaken for a 12-year-old boy a lot more than I would like to admit. Sorry if this gets a bit long, by the way. So there I was, Christmas list in hand and ready to take this thing on like a champ. I had more money than I had for Christmas in a long time, and I was really excited to get some excellent gifts for my best friend and my parents. I was walking along on the ground floor, headed for the stairs, when I passed this lady who was giving out hand lotions. She had a few small packets in her hands and a larger bottle on a little table besides where she stood. Okay, cool, I think to myself. Grab a sweet-ass lotion packet and keep going. I didn't want to be rude and just kept walking, so I took the lotion and smiled in a sort of, thanks for that, kind of way. Before I had the opportunity to keep going, this chick grabs my wrist and lets out a squeal that would hurt a banshee's ears. You keep your nails natural? Like, yeah, I do. I clean for a living, so there's not much point in getting them done unless I'm going somewhere special. Sure, I said, and tried to wrench myself free. To my dismay, this lady has a hold on me like a hungry anaconda, and I knew I'd be stuck listening to her sales pitch. I was a bit confused as to why she had picked me out of the entire crowd of people walking, especially because the boots and studded jacket usually scared off potential creeps, and probably friends too, but hey. Unfortunately, all the leather and studs in the world did nothing for my baby face, so I probably still seemed easy prey for this asshole. She's all, look how great this makes your hands and nails, while all I could do was think why she thought I cared. My hands are all scarred and calloused from years of guitar practice, so there isn't much that can be done for them. I attempted to get away by letting her know that I wasn't interested and that I had to get back to shopping before I got too late. She batted her eyelashes and said that, lucky me, since I was so cute, she would give me an entire set for the low, low price of $20 if I followed her to go get it from the stand upstairs. I'd just come from the top floor of the mall since there were exits and entrances on both floors, and I knew for a fact that the only kiosk up there was an eyebrow-threading place. No way I was going anywhere besides GameStop to get my little brother a new game for Christmas, so I declined. She tightened her hold and just repeated the sales pitch, this time asking me weird questions and between trying to convince me to buy this lotion. How old are you? 19. Where do you go to school? Graduated. Do you have a sister? No. Where's your boyfriend? I don't have one. I tried again to tell her nicely because I hate hurting people's feelings. Just screw right off and let me get back to Christmas shopping. When she stared dead into my eyes and said, "So you're alone." A million little alarms went off in my head and I lied and told her I was there with my dad. She looked around and asked which one he was. I pointed out the most intimidating looking guy I could find and she launched back in trying to sell me this product at warp speed, like she was in some kind of huge hurry. I told her again more firmly this time that I was not spending any money on her hand lotion. She started walking off in a random direction, still holding my wrist, and insisted that I come with her to see more of the products she was selling because surely I would want something, despite the fact that every freaking word out of my mouth said the complete opposite. I yanked my arm free and stood my ground, prepared to defend myself if she tried pulling me with her again. "I am not buying anything from you. I need to get back to shopping." Before I could even turn away, she asked what I used to wash my face. Bit caught off guard, I told her, and she began launching a barrage of insults at me like, "You're too pale and your skin is so dry," featuring my personal favorite, "It looks like a shedding lizard." Ouch, that hurt. I didn't put any stocks into her petty attempts to insult me. People had complimented me on my skin before and I liked the way I look anyway. I walked away instead of throwing anything back at her and headed upstairs to finish shopping. But before I left the mall that night, I marched my dry lizard skin right over to the nearest mall cop and informed them that he had some rude people working in the mall. I wasn't sure who else to tell, so I wasn't too surprised to see him scrunch up his face in confusion. I expected him to direct me to a sort of complaints desk or something similar, but nothing could have prepared me for what he said next. "We don't sell that here." Well, crap. I described the woman and told him what brand of lotion she had tried to get me to purchase, but he only shook his head and told me the vendor for that particular brand had not been coming around to that mall for years. On my way back out to the parking lot, I passed the spot where she had originally confronted me. There was no woman, no samples, no vendor's cart. I later asked my cousin, who worked in the mall, if there was anybody selling that lotion there. She said no, and a quick peek at the mall's online directory confirmed it. I hate to think where we would have ended up had I followed her. So my Let's Not Meet encounter happened 7 years ago. I haven't really spoken about it since it happened, as I kind of just wanted to move on and I was really unnerved by the whole experience. I was 25. I am female and I was working a job as an admin assistant, office worker to tide me over and pay my bills until I eventually figured out what the career of my dream was. I was tired of the job. I'd been there about a year when this happened, and believe me, when the creepy shit went down, I was certainly incensed to get myself on a decent career path and the heck out of that place. So you understand my old workplace building, which will give you a clear picture of how this began. I worked in a somewhat old building with a few floors, and on each floor were numerous office spaces that were rented out by different companies. It was a pretty open plan building, some parts more dilapidated than others, and it was in serious need of refurbishment to bring it A, up to health and safety standards, and B, cosmetic standards for the general public. How the offices on my floor were set out meant that our small office, which only consisted of 4 to 5 workers on different days, was situated at the front of the building with access through the front and back of the building, but nobody really used the back. Our staff quarters, as we called them, the lunchroom, were situated at the back of the building, and being an older style building meant there was a long hall and lots of space between the office and the staff quarters. Staff quarters were used only for lunch breaks, and as we were such a small office, we all rotated our lunch breaks so that only one person was off for lunch in the lunchroom at a time. Nobody else really used the lunchroom, as they preferred to go out and get lunch from the nearby shops, but as I had a shorter lunch break, it was always me. Alone in the lunchroom at the back of this old creepy-ass building by the rear entry point. Other parts of the building were now under refurbishment, so there was a lot of upheaval in certain spaces and areas, but we managed to retain ours as normal for a while, before building work was scheduled to begin on our floor. Bear in mind that the lunchroom was so far back from the main offices that nothing could be heard or seen that way. There were only 2 companies on the ground floor where I was situated. The other one was on the other side of the building and used the front entrance, but we rarely saw them and certainly didn't keep track of their staff members or clients, and there was no need for us to see who was going in and out. Anyways, I digress. I was sitting in the lunchroom one day eating, heater going as it was freezing, minding my own business when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow quickly sweep past the door from the light underneath it. It wasn't unusual for new clients to be wandering around looking for a specific office they required. As we were on the ground floor, there was often a slew of stupid people wandering the corridors aimlessly looking for the office they required. We did have a code entry system on the front door and a telephone system, so you could press the office you needed to get into and it would call through, and they would let you in so people couldn't just walk in without being let in, if you get me. We also had a code for workers to use to get through the front door. As I said, the back door wasn't much used apart from the odd worker who had a set of keys for it, and it was completely unmonitored. I wasn't too startled even when the lunchroom door opened this particular day, and a smart-looking man put his head round, suited and booted and smelling like expensive cologne. I honestly was more embarrassed to see somebody as attractive peering in, as I was sat there with mayo splatter on my shirt and a mouthful of bread, looking in absolute state. But hey, I didn't usually see anyone back there, and I am a messy eater, I admit. "Can I help you?" I asked him, trying to clean myself up. He laughed and said I looked like the one who needed help, and I immediately laughed back, aware that he was still at the door and not imposing on me in any way. Yet, when I laughed along with him, he seemed to take that as an invitation to come right in and sit opposite me at the table. And to my surprise, he took some food out of his expensive-looking leather bag and started brazenly eating a sandwich. "Hey, I'm the HR manager for such and such company upstairs, and every time I go out to get my lunch, I always wonder who is sitting in here alone, so I thought I'd just have a look," he said, still eating and seemingly very calm and chill. The weird thing about him was that he seemed so normal. Nothing about this guy made me worried. In fact, it was nice to have some company on my lunch break, as most of the time I just sat scrolling through creepy news articles on my phone. We carried on chatting, mostly about mundane stuff. I asked him about his job in the company upstairs, and he asked me about mine. I asked him about where he usually took his lunch breaks. You know, just normal small talk, but it felt more comfortable than that. This guy was super charming. He made me feel at ease. That part is the most chilling to me. I was totally at ease and unguarded. It became a pretty regular thing for him to join me in the lunchroom, and honestly, I was beginning to get a bit of a crush on this guy. He had a good job, was attractive, and was very charming and normal. I began looking forward to seeing him. Stupid, I know. A little attention from an attractive guy, but hey, I was single and not bad looking. So I figured, why couldn't I have a harmless little crush? He had told me his name was Alan, and honestly, I didn't intend to take it anywhere with him. I was totally happy single at the time, and I was getting some minor flirtations from him, but nothing that confirmed he had a crush on me too, or wanted to take it any further. He moaned about the building work taking place and how the whole upstairs offices were a mess. Their break rooms, etc., had all been gutted, and he was glad to have somewhere to eat his lunch that nobody else knew about from his office. Again, not your average creeper, I know. At this point, I didn't even think the guy was a creeper. Until one day, things took a turn. Alan stormed into the lunchroom one Thursday, and I swear, in his eyes, I saw the look of a caged animal. You know that crazy look. You know that restless and jittery and hyper look. It kind of says somebody isn't thinking straight at all. I immediately had my guard up a bit because I had never seen him like this before. It freaked me out the way he stormed into the room, slammed his bag down on the table, and started ranting about how his boss was a jerk and that he wished he could gut him like a fish. All while pacing around, running his hand through his hair, beads of sweat forming on his brow, and pure rage in his eyes. I'd always thought his eyes were so pretty before, They were a steely blue, but right now they looked darker and more imposing than ever. I tried really hard to pacify him and calm him down. I was repeatedly saying it would be alright and to calm down and let's just eat. And whatever had happened, I'm sure could be sorted out. He slumped down in a chair and I went over to him, kind of standing beside him but obviously over him, and I put my hand on his shoulder to console him. With that, he flew up and pushed me back against the wall. I was stunned and I couldn't speak. His body was pressed against me and almost through his rage, he was in a trance-like state. After he pushed me back against the wall, he just stood there, his hands holding my wrist down by my side. Almost like he was taking some weird comfort from the fact that he had me up against the wall. He buried his face into my neck and I was frozen to the spot, like, what the heck is going on here? I always said I would never be one of those girls in an emergency or dangerous situations to freeze. But honestly, like, I had never been in this type of situation, and I could tell he was really volatile in this precise moment. I really didn't know what he was going to do, so I didn't want to risk pissing him off more and then have him attack me or something. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, his face buried in my neck, still holding my wrist quite forcefully, when all of a sudden, he licked my neck and said, "You smell nice." Yes, he actually licked my neck. Seemingly calmer, that's when I decided, nope, I am not standing here with this person who was clearly unstable, holding me up against a wall in anger, and then suddenly being all soft-spoken again and licking my neck in this weird predatory way. That's what it felt like to me right in that second. I felt so stupid for starting to eat with this guy and not even question why he was coming to our lunchroom. I told him to get off me. I was leaving. At that point, I was prepared to take a beating. It shouldn't have been like that, but I honestly didn't know what his deal was. Was he crazy? Was he just emotional or upset? Was he trying to seduce me? Was he going to hurt me? I don't know. I realized I didn't even know this guy. We spent half an hour to an hour in each other's company, passing the lunch hour, but I didn't really know anything about him as a person. It had been a couple of weeks of lunches together, and I realized how short an amount of time that was to really have any idea about this person. He let go of my wrist, and then in the most sinister tone I'd ever heard, he said, "You always seem like you wanted it from me, you damn whore." Before I could respond, he grabbed his bag and stormed out of the lunchroom, and tears just sprung to my eyes. I cracked the door open to make sure he'd left, and I just sprinted back to the front of the building where my office was and told the guys in there everything that had just happened. They were absolutely fuming. They knew this guy had been hanging around me in the lunchroom, but as I'd always been comfortable with it and thought Alan was okay, nobody ever thought anything of it. They actually thought it was hilarious every day when I came back from lunch all tongue-tied after my encounter with attractive Alan, as they now referred to him. They insisted we march upstairs and put in a complaint as a company, and I knew that even if I didn't agree, they would march up themselves to do it. Eventually, I agreed, after feeling shaky and vulnerable, but I knew I didn't want to have to face Alan after the incident in the lunchroom. I went up regardless, flanked by two guys I worked with, one of whom was my immediate boss. As we began explaining the situation, it was evident that something was wrong. The woman and the man from the upstairs company looked really confused when I explained about their HR manager, Alan, and what he had done. They explained that their HR manager was a female called Jules, and that I must have been mistaken because there was no Alan that worked at the company. We asked every single company in the building, and not one company had an Alan working for them and never had. We eventually came to the conclusion that Alan had been coming in every day for lunch, but with absolutely no idea why or what for. We also didn't know if he had the building code or a set of keys for the back, and we didn't know where he had initially come from. Unnoticed, wandering freely around the building. The locks were changed, the code was changed, and CCTV was installed, as it never had been before. Plus, security checks were put in place at the building after this incident, with everybody entering the building being monitored. I never ever saw Alan again, and I still to this day don't know why he was coming in the building every day, having lunch with me, pretending to be an office worker, and I don't know what happened that day when he flipped. So yeah, this isn't the usual creep around let's not meet, but Alan, let's never meet again. I'm back with another story from my childhood. I tried to add more details that I can remember since the last one got requests to be more specific. I was about 14 or 15 years old, walking back from one of my friend's house at around 10 p.m. on a school night. Trisha's father was a police dispatcher, and the small, medium town I grew up in didn't have much of a force to speak of. I could run to the station in 2 minutes flat, and the park I frequented was next to it. It was also the same building as the Justice Department. Between Trisha's house and my own was less than a mile. I was halfway there when I could see a car, a Ford of a dark color, slowly roll through an intersection in front of me. I knew it was a Ford because it looked like a normal unmarked police car. It stopped for a good 30 seconds in the middle of said intersection as I walked towards it. When I got to it, I sort of stopped. Not as much scared as I was plain confused. I walked around the back of it. The lights inside were turned off as well, and the dark shape in front of the seat sat very still. I kept my ears perked, listening to the sound of the car's tires inching across the gravel. I didn't want to turn, but I could hear the low purr of the engine behind me, following me ever so slowly. Now I was worried. But Dad didn't teach me to panic, especially for how close I was to the police station. I took a deep breath and broke into a full-on sprint across the road, passing through people's lawns and yards, and through an open lot until I could see the 2-lane road that cut our town in half. Across that road was the station. I didn't even want to look behind me again and see if the man was there, because I heard his car. No lights flooded the ground or the space around me. He still had them turned off. I kept running into the street. It was so late and there were no cars on the road. I pushed open the gate separating the park and the outside, flying through it. Breathing hurt. It was winter in the northeast and the cold was biting. When I reached the glass door of the city hall/police station, my heart fluttered. I was safe. It would be okay. I had to ring the bell to get the police to open the double-locked doors. As I did that, I heard a car pull in behind me into the parking lot. It was that same car, and who should step out of it but Trisha's dad, in his police dispatcher's uniform. "Honey, why did you run away from me? I was trying to get your attention. You left your cell phone out." He held it out, walking towards me, proving his good intentions. His smile was wide and it was supposed to be reassuring, but it chilled me. Nobody came to the door. I was alone with him still. When he got to me, I grabbed the cell phone and stuffed it into my back pocket. I remember the next thing that happened like it was yesterday. He had coffee on his breath and he smelled like cigarettes. Suddenly, he grabbed my arm and pinned me to the door behind him. "Didn't your," insert racial slur here, "daddy tell you to say thank you, pretty girl?" I was shocked. Not once have he ever spoken to me like that. They were from Kansas, but he'd never given any indication that he thought like this. "Didn't you hear me, girl?" He was inches from my face. His grin now a creepy, sadistic sneer. He used his thumb that pinned my arm to touch the side of my breast. The way he said "girl" still sends a cold shiver down my spine. I've been assaulted before, but Trisha's dad's way of saying "girl" still haunts me today. I'll hear it in my mind and want to shrink into nothingness, scream at it until it goes away and cry. And just as suddenly he let go and laughed. I didn't know until a police officer knocked on the glass door behind me. He was staring at Trisha's dad. "Problem, miss?" "No problem, officer. She just forgot her cell phone." Trisha's dad answered for me, his normal smile back on his face. He stepped away from me and let go, but I could still feel his hands on my arm. I don't remember what I did. Nod? Whimper? But I blinked on whatever happened until I got home and cried. Never even told my twin sister, Lexi, what went down. Ever since then, he looked at me in the creepiest way. He would do that sneer at me as soon as I walked into the door to their house. I'll never forget how awful that night made me feel. I didn't walk home alone again. Without a knife. I took from my dad's possessions at least. He's always been a creep and has caused a lot of issues with Trisha's mom and him. They're divorced now since this happened almost 10 years ago. Not only was this the beginning of my problems with him, but it was for Trisha too. She and I still keep in very close contact and she updates me on her situations with them. Apparently he attempted to molest her several times with physical repercussions. She's a strong-willed, physically capable woman and handled herself well. She got the heck out of Dodge as soon as she turned 18. Thankfully, she's an adult now, far away from him, and hasn't seen him in several years. I hope she never does. Hello. First off, I'm very new to posting here, so please let me know if I need to correct anything. This just happened yesterday evening in a small mountain town about 40 minutes outside of the major city that my boyfriend and I live in. We had decided to reserve a jacuzzi at a hot springs resort, just to take some time to relax and enjoy getting out of the city for a few hours. We left the apartment around 6:30, to allow for traffic and make sure we made it to the resort by 8. We had a nice drive up, making conversation and flicking through songs. We arrived about half an hour ahead of schedule, so we decided to sit in the car and wait to check in. When we arrived, I was immediately met with a sense of unease. I didn't tell my boyfriend, but made a mental note of the feeling. I've learned not to brush those feelings off, so I made sure I was a bit more alert during our little trip. We checked in and got all set up in our jacuzzi. The way it was set up was very private, so there was fencing all around us and a door with a lock on it to get into the area. When I first walked in, I was overcome with the feeling that I had to get that door locked as soon as I could. I'm usually a safe person and would have done this anyway, but the feeling of the locked door being a necessity at that moment was rather uncanny. As the night progresses, the sky begins to darken, and my boyfriend and I are remarking on how beautiful the mountains and sky are at this time of the evening. We are making jokes about some crazy mountain man running out of the hills towards us, and I start cracking up. I'm mid-laugh when we hear someone jiggle the door to our jacuzzi area. I stop laughing and I am immediately struck with a fight-or-flight sense of fear. Now, I've been startled before, but this was just different. I felt legitimately threatened by the energy that whoever was outside of that door was giving off. As the jiggling continued, my boyfriend called out, "Yo, you need something?" The person on the other side began to yank forcefully on the door now, and my boyfriend yelled out, "Hey." I've heard my boyfriend's voice when he gets upset or angry at someone, but this was different. This was the "you really don't want to mess with me" protective type of voice. The jiggling continued for a moment longer and then ceased completely. During this time, I had been about 15 feet away from my clothes, which contained my knife, and was 100% ready to dive for them if the person had broken through the locked door. Since we were only a few minutes away from our time being up anyway, we decided to get dressed as quickly as possible and just book it back to the car. The whole time we were getting ready, up until we drove out of the lot, I could feel somebody watching us. About 100 yards or so away from the resort, there was a park of mobile homes. From our tub, you could easily see these mobile homes if you stood up on the edge of the jacuzzi. That means that whoever was home and looking out their window could see you too. During the whole time we were there, I was the only one who stood up completely, so I'm the only one that anyone in the mobile homes would have seen, making it seem like I was all alone there potentially. Later in the evening, my boyfriend and I were rehashing exactly what had happened and trying to figure out who the heck had tried to get into our jacuzzi. We figured if it had been resort staff, they would have made their presence known and asked to come inside. If it had been another customer and they tried the wrong door, we assumed they would have said something like, "Oh, sorry, wrong door." My boyfriend looked at me and said, "You know, you were the only one who stood up in the hot tub. And with the way it's positioned, somebody in that trailer could have easily been staring right at you." This honestly made my blood run cold for a moment because I knew he was right and I knew in my gut that's probably what happened. I'm a pretty small girl, about 5'5", and I look barely 18, even though I'm actually almost 23 and I weigh about 100 pounds. Overpowering me would be like taking candy from a baby. This realization, coupled with the fact that we both felt so disturbed and uneasy about the whole thing, made me realize whoever was trying to get in there did not have any good intentions. I've thought about sharing this story on Reddit before. The time and place never seemed right until I found this subreddit. I rarely ever think of this. I think I mostly blocked it out. I am female, and when I was 25, I was in a transition period of my life. I was divorcing my husband and moving back to my home state to figure stuff out. My aunt had a small 1,500 square foot 1950s house in a quiet neighborhood. A doors that stick, squeaky wood floors type of place. She had moved out but couldn't commit to the cell. She was happy to let me live there for a bit. I lived in the house for about 5 months. This house was a single-story home, but it was on a hill, so if you went around the back of the house outside, you could walk through a door in a small basement of sorts that you could stand in. If you were in this small basement and continued to walk toward the front of the house, you would quickly be crouching and then crawling. It was a small concrete storage area, and it was under what was my bedroom. One thing I remember about this place was that it was creaky and not well insulated. The floors were creaky, and when you were down in the basement area, you could sort of see light coming through the cracks in the bedroom floorboards. I maybe went down there once, got creeped out, and left. It was around the back of the house, like I said, and I had no reason to even be back there. Being 25 and recently leaving my jerk husband, I will admit I had a few male suitors visit me in that house, in that creaky, uninsulated bedroom. So I get my dream job, and I am moving out of the house. I'm also moving out of the state. My aunt has one request of me, to turn the water off at the street before I leave. So right before I leave the house, I turn the water off at the street. I come back inside and turn on the tub faucet. No water. I have done my job. However, this is where fate steps in. I left the faucet turned on. Didn't think to turn it back off. I drive away to my new life. A few days later, my aunt calls. She's upset because the water company has called her to say there is an unusually high amount of water running at her home. I promised her that I turned the water off and told her about checking the tub, so I'm out of state. She's out of state. My mom gets recruited to go over and figure out what's going on. Well, come to find out, the neighbor's husband from next door had been kicked out. He was living in the little room under my bedroom. He had strung an electric cord over the fence from his house. He had clothes and a toothbrush. Guess he was bathing in our yard. And when I turned off the water, he went right back out to the street and turned it back on. He had been living right under my bedroom floorboards. I am tense just writing and remembering this. I never ever want to meet this guy. The thought of him right under my feet, listening to me in my bedroom, still gives me chills. March 14th, 2008. I was 7 years old, a junior in high school. I lived in a square-mile suburban town in Nassau County, which is one of the richest counties in America. Life there was very quiet. Not much goes on. I had been struggling with depression and couldn't focus on my schoolwork. I had a paper and a whole bunch of homework I hadn't done the night before, so I woke up at 7 a.m. and made my way downstairs to my mom's room to ask if I could sleep in, catch up on some schoolwork, and go to school late, and she said okay. I woke up around 10 a.m., later than I had anticipated. I walked downstairs, poured myself a bowl of cereal, and said good morning to my poodle. That's when I heard knocking on the door. At first it was regular, calm knocking. I didn't think much of it, but didn't want to answer the door in my pajamas. I picked up the house phone and dialed my mom's phone number. She was at work, as a church secretary. Hey, Mom, are you expecting anybody at the house? Because somebody is knocking on the door. No. Could it be the cable guy? No? Okay, I won't answer it. After I hung up the phone, the knocking continued. It increased and started becoming more rapid and frantic. I peeked through the curtain and saw a bluish pickup truck outside my property, and a man standing at the door. He had a red hat on, a denim jacket, jeans, and sneakers. No logos or uniform. I didn't get a good read on his face either. He kept knocking. At this point, it was riling up my dog, and he was barking on the top of the knocking. I swear, the knocking seemed to go on forever. I checked the locks on the doors to make sure they were secure. Then suddenly it stopped. Quiet. And I hear a creak, the sound of the side gate to my house. My pulse raced. Maybe it's the meter reader. I stood in a panic in the living room. The next thing I heard was shuffling coming from the bathroom. Could it be my cat playing with the shower curtain? I had to check. I walked down the hall and peered around the corner to see inside my bathroom. I'll never forget what I saw. The window in the shower was wide open. In the middle of my bright and sterile bathroom was a dark mess pouring in through the window, one leg at a time. Ah, shit. Do I run outside the front door? What if there are more men outside to chase me down? Side door? too close to the bathroom. So I bolted up the stairs as carefully and silently as I could. I heard my dog barking incessantly, not in a panic, but excitement, happiness. I closed my bedroom door behind me as quietly as possible. I didn't shut it all the way so as to not make any noise. Cell phone. I picked it up and wondered who would come quicker, 911 or my mom, who was at work less than a mile away. I dialed her number. In a whisper, "Mom, there's somebody in the house." The creak of his footsteps on the stairs. Shit, I had to think fast. I ducked underneath my desk. I could hear one step at a time as he slowly ascended the stairs. It was kind of like a movie. I quickly dialed 911. That's when my bedroom door slowly opened. His head peered around it to scan the room. That was it. He saw me. I dropped the phone before I could hit call and instinctively put my hands over my head as he rushed at me with a crowbar flying through the morning air. "Please don't hurt me," I said. "Don't scream, don't say anything." With a gloved hand, he struck me in the face, sending my glasses flying. Now I'm blind. Fell to the ground and squatted with my hands over my head. He took my cell phone. I was shaking and my mind was racing. I'm going to die, I thought. He dangled the crowbar over my neck. I could feel the iron tip graze the skin. He was standing over me. How much will this hurt? How long will it take? What will it feel like having a crowbar in my skull? My mom is on the way home. Not her too. This is it. I'm screwed. He rummaged through my things on my desk. Then there was silence. Is he still in the room? How many people are inside my house? I don't want to know. I heard the house getting trashed downstairs, and I could hear my dog jumping and barking at the invader or invaders, and I could hear them hushing him in a baby voice. Quiet again, what felt like hours. I heard my name, and I was stunned and confused. Heard it again. My mom. I ran down the stairs. The front door was wide open. There she was in my living room. Bursted into tears and told her everything. I was still in a panic. Was he still in the house? Was he hiding? Called 911. It came investigated. A pillowcase to stuff the items in. My iPod, speakers, a brand new camcorder, laptop, and leather jacket. For disguise. Were the items missing? I spoke with a forensic artist. The cops drove me around the neighborhood to take a look at suspects they stopped on the street, but he was never caught. After everything was settled, I needed a shower. I cried when I had to scrub the tub of muddy footprints. My post-traumatic stress terrorized my life. I had to sleep in my mom's room. I kept a knife under my pillow. Everywhere I went, thought I saw the man who robbed me, not only of my personal belongings, but also of my overall sense of safety. It didn't help when at school the principal made an announcement about the break-in on the loudspeaker. He told the entire building that I let my attacker in and referred to him as a gentleman. This twisted the story completely. So much so that a rumor went around school that my attacker assaulted me and that I liked it. A whole lot has happened since then, and now I'm much happier, but I still feel the effects of PTSD today. The scary thing here is that he was a landscaper. My family never had enough money for landscaping, but both of our neighbors did. Landscapers are given access to people's yards, sometimes when they're not home, and have plenty of time to scope out unlocked windows, access points, etc. You probably didn't expect anyone to be home because I didn't answer the door. The moral of the story is to always answer the door. Or if you don't feel safe answering the door, make a noise to signify that you're home. And of course, call the police first. I was looking for a story that I posted a while back, but I think I deleted it on accident. By far, this has one of the craziest and scariest moments of my life, and in light of recent events going on in my life, has resurfaced in my mind. I lived a pretty sheltered life as a child. I'm an only child, and as is sometimes the case with only children, I lived an extremely overprotected life. My mom drilled a stranger danger in my head since preschool and would always stress the importance of being safe. Never go into a bathroom by yourself. Never get into a stranger's car. Never drink from an open bottle. Always ask for permission. Always stay within adults' eyesight. I have to admit that half of the time it went in one ear and out the other. As a preteen, I thought I knew it all and hated the constant nagging. However, I get where she was coming from now. My mom was a recent widow and was adjusting to the role of mom and dad, trying to shield me from the horrors that I am only now beginning to see. We lived in an area that used to be a quaint little dairy town, but over the years had gone downhill and became crime-ridden. The dairy farm fell out of business, and in its place, they constructed homes. It wasn't a bad place to live, but it wasn't the best either. I grew up thinking it was a common occurrence to hear helicopters fly by, announcing that they were looking for somebody. The cross street from my house led to a park that was known for gang activity, where almost every weekend, somebody would either be found dead or beaten up. But it was okay because we didn't live on that end of the street, I thought. We knew most of the neighbors, and if we didn't know them by name, we at least knew what they looked like. Despite it not being the best neighborhood, it was pretty quiet overall, and we felt safe enough. By the time I was in 7th grade, I finally had gotten some freedoms. My best friend Tiffany and I would take turns spending the night at each other's houses, but most of the time she would come to mine. Tiffany had a little brother that would always pester us, and she liked coming over to my house because we could talk about boys without her little brother trying to eavesdrop. I think my mom preferred it that way too because she was much more lenient with us, knowing that we are safe at our house. She would even sometimes go on her daily walks and leave us home by ourselves for about an hour or so, and we loved this. I'm not sure what happened or what we did this particular day. Probably ate pizza, sat on my front porch, outside as the sun set, and listened to the radio at way too high of a volume. Perhaps this was even one of those nights my mom left us home alone for a while. I wish I could say I saw something out of the ordinary or felt uneasy, but I didn't. After it got dark, we retreated to my room. My room has 2 windows. One faces the backyard and the other faces the street. I like natural light as much as possible, so as usual, the blinds were open. Even though it was now dark outside, which meant people could see in but we couldn't see out, I still left them open. I was too lazy to climb onto my bed to close them and had a false sense of security, knowing there was a tall pine tree directly in front of my window. With the tree in front of the window, I felt protected, almost as if my mom were invisible to the outside world. As the night grew quieter, we decided to build a fort out of sheets and tell scary stories. By this time, it was really late at night, and my mom was as fast asleep in her room. After the first story or two, I started to grow uneasy and got up to close the blinds. I was creeped out, thinking somebody could be lurking outside, peeking in, but figured it was all in my head because of the stories we were telling. We got through a couple more classic stories, like the Hook Killer and stuff. I started talking about true ghost stories, things that relatives claimed they saw or heard. Our eyes were watery, hearts pounding, and muscles clenched when suddenly there was loud, furious banging on my bedroom window. It wasn't a knock that grew into a series of louder knocks. It was like an angry one that you felt throughout your body. My heart was pounding in sync with each subsequent knock. I sat there frozen, not knowing what to do. My mind was frantically trying to make sense of the situation. It just didn't make sense that somebody would be knocking on my bedroom window so late at night. We have an iron gate that surrounds our house, and it's pretty loud. I was surprised that we didn't hear the gate open. Even then, the front door is 5 feet from the gate. Why didn't they knock at the door first? My room is all the way in the back and wasn't even the first window with the light on. You pass by 2 other windows before you get to mine. A million questions are running through my head, and my brain comes to the only possible conclusion. It's Tiffany's little brother trying to scare us. Yeah, because it makes sense that a 10-year-old boy walked over to my house in the middle of the night to scare us. In what felt like ages, but was probably only a matter of seconds, I finally came to the realization that it wasn't her little brother. The knocks continued. They were loud and angry, yet nobody was saying anything. We were both frozen in fear. I just wanted to stay hidden in the fort where I couldn't be seen. What if whoever was knocking was peeking in through the cracks in the blinds and watched me as I crawled out from under the sheets? The thought of that made my every muscle weak. Then silence. The knocking had stopped. I felt my body ease up a little bit. Maybe who was ever there had left, and cue teenage brain, we decided to go investigate. My mom was blissfully unaware of what was going on, still fast asleep. We slid out of the fort and tiptoed down the hallway towards the front door. Adrenaline pumped through our bodies as we decided one of us would sneak to the front door and look out the peephole or window and see if we could see something. Neither one of us wanted to be the one to do it, but it was my house, so I volunteered. All the doors were locked and the windows had bars on them. I just had to be as quiet as possible. Beneath every step, I took the wood creaked and groaned. After a few minutes, I finally found myself standing at the front door. My whole torso felt numb as I inched my face closer to the peephole. Holding my breath, I look out and I suddenly feel hot and cold at the same time. I didn't know whether to keep looking out or slink back down. I think a little part of me had convinced myself that the porch would be empty that night, but instead, standing on my porch was an unfamiliar man. I had no idea who this man is, but he is standing awkwardly close to the door. Something about it just didn't seem right. What threw me off the most was that he was just pounding on my bedroom window 15 or so minutes ago, and now he was standing at the front door so calmly and quiet. It was as if the roaring avalanche had turned into a falling feather. With my stomach in my throat, I snuck back to the hallway where Tiffany was waiting for me. All I could say is, "There's a man out there." "Immediately," she says. "Go tell your mom." It wasn't a question but a demand. We ran into her room and urgently told her, "Mom, someone's knocking." She must have sensed the urgency in my voice because she sprung up and told us to stay in her room with the door closed and instructed us not to open the door no matter what happened. We stood behind that door for what seemed like ages, trying to listen. The front door was too far away, so all we heard was silence. Finally, we hear footsteps coming toward us. It was so quiet around us that I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I about had a heart attack when my mom's bedroom door started swinging open. It was my mom. She told us not to worry about it and that the man was gone. This left me with a million questions, but she was very vague. What did he want? Nothing. Who was he? I don't know. She shooed us back to bed and we complied. The adrenaline had started to wear off and I was now exhausted. We didn't stay up and speculate or talk. That was it, and it was the end of the story. For now, at least. The next day, I was sitting in my room and heard my mom talking to someone. I have always been a very quiet kid. Even as a baby, people would often forget I was around. I'm quiet, but I hear everything. I stopped what I was doing, probably downloading music on Napster or something, and listened. My mom was telling her friend about the man. Apparently, she opened the door and through the screen asked the man if he needed any help. The man stammered as if trying to think up a story and introduced himself as the neighbor. He said that his mom was sick and he was going around asking for money to help buy her medicine. Concerned but also trying to poke holes at his story, my mom asked him what her name was in case my mom knew her. The guy didn't give her an answer, or gave a vague one and then pointed in a general direction, saying they lived at that house over there. My mom didn't buy it. She knew everybody that lived near us and she had never seen this man before. She probably should have just closed the door at this point and told him she didn't have any money on her, but she didn't want to make him mad. She didn't know if he was armed or dangerous and thought, maybe he's just a junkie and will run off if I give him some cash. Luckily, she had fallen asleep in her clothes, so as she reached in her back pocket, she found $5. Change from the pizza we had ordered earlier. She unlocked the screen door and handed him the cash. The man started getting more aggressive and growls. "That's all you got?" Now, my mom is starting to sense something more sinister in the man. He's not just a junkie, or if he is, he's a very aggressive one. My mom then lies to him and quickly tells the man, "Yes, this is all I have. We live day to day here, and $5 is actually even more than I should spare, but your mom is sick and I feel bad. She definitely needed this money more than we do right now." Not satisfied by her answer, he continues to demand more cash. My mom realizes that this man is not taking no for an answer and begins to bluff. She tells him that she'll go get her husband. Maybe he has some cash on him. We really don't have any more cash, but maybe my husband has some on him. I would hate to leave a neighbor in need. Your mom must really need that medicine, Tim. At once, the man's demeanor changes as he mutters, "No, that's okay," and treks out of there. I don't know what would have happened if the man had called her on her bluff, but thinking a man was present scared the heck out of the guy enough to drive him away fast. I grew cold thinking that he probably thought Tiffany and I were home alone. He must have been watching us and was planning on breaking in. Cue teenage brain. Oh, well, he's gone. Gotta go download that Usher album. Disclaimer. I'm not sure if the following event was related, but due to its close proximity to the previous one, I think it's definitely worth mentioning. The following week, I was waiting for Tiffany's mom to pick me up to go to school. We lived 2 houses away, so they would always swing by for me in the morning. I usually would be done getting ready before they arrived, so I would head outside to the front yard and wait for them out there. Sometimes I would go climb a tree in the front and look for the bird eggs. Other times, I'd just search for 4-leaf clovers. I was walking around not paying attention to my surroundings, when I heard what I can only describe as what I would imagine a gun with a silencer sounds like. A quiet little pew, followed by a loud noise, which I later realized was glass breaking. Stunned, I looked around. What the heck was that? All I saw was a white van drive by. I looked over at my neighbor's house and noticed that the window to their car was completely shattered. Shards of glass everywhere. I still didn't quite put 2 and 2 together until I saw the same white van drive by, the driver staring me down. I felt a sense of unease and wanted to run back inside. For some reason, though, I didn't. I had too much pride and didn't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing they scared me. Also, I thought if I ran inside, they would maybe think I was a snitch and would retaliate more. I played dumb as if I didn't notice anything, and they drove by again. And once more after that. Tried to not look at the van as it drove by, but each time it drove by, I could feel the driver's gaze on me. Soon after, Tiffany's mom came by and took me to school. I don't know if the man drove by a 4th time. Never told anyone about the van. Luckily, nothing ever happened after that. This happened to a friend of mine who lived in the same neighborhood as me when we were about 8 or 9 years old. My friend E and her family lived just a few houses down the street from mine. We lived in a neighborhood where almost everyone knew each other. The biggest worry we ever had was that some outsider would come into the neighborhood and cause trouble. Some people left their homes unlocked because we felt that safe. There was an incredibly nice family that lived directly across the street from E's house. A mom, a dad, a 16-year-old son, and their other mentally challenged son who was 22 years old. I'll call him Tim. Tim was always home because he wasn't employed due to his disability, but his parents were working full-time, and his brother had school. All day, every day, he would be outside waving and smiling at anyone who drove or walked by. Big smiles, showing all of his teeth and sometimes giggling, just out of the pure excitement and happiness of interacting with other people since he spent most of his time alone. He was not creepy per se. One day, E was sick and didn't go to school. Even though she was only about 8 or 9 years old, E was allowed to stay home sick by herself. Plus her mom was going to be home around 2 o'clock anyways, since she only worked part-time, and the neighborhood was safe enough. E locked all of the doors except the one that led into the garage. They used this as their front door because it was easier in those cookie-cutter homes to just open the garage, pull in, get out of the car, close the garage, and walk into their house through the unlocked door that led from the inside of the garage to the inside of their home. This is obviously not the safest way to protect your home from intruders, but we literally all did it, as if a flimsy garage door could keep anyone from getting into it if they wanted. The worst part is that they had an outside cat and kept the garage door cracked just enough for him to get inside for his food or shelter if he needed be. So E's asleep, feeling sick and with a fever. All the doors and windows are locked, except the door leading to the cracked garage door. Tim was bound to know she was home alone since he was outside the front of his house all the time. E wakes up to pounding on the front door. Startled, she walks downstairs and looks through the peephole. It's Tim. She cracks the door and he says something along the lines of how he notices everything and would guard her home since she's home alone. She said thanks, but there was no need to, and to have a good day. It was beautiful weather. He looked pissed. He got angry and said, "You think I can't do it because I'm dumb, but you watch and see because I'm not dumb." She said, "Sorry, and I didn't mean it like this, but I have to rest now." She dozed off and woke up to a noise downstairs in the kitchen, the room the door from the garage led into. She hadn't heard the garage door open, but she was sick, so she figured she was deep in sleep and just hadn't noticed. Completely disoriented from time, she looked over at the alarm clock. It was 10:20, way too early for her mom to be home. At that moment, she heard noises from downstairs again. She didn't call out. She had been sleeping in her parents' room and ran into their bathroom, slamming the door loudly. Then she remembered their bathroom door had no lock on it. The noise she made slamming the door alerted the intruder to where in the house she was at, and big footsteps started coming upstairs. She moved quickly and quietly to her parents' closet, which was on the other side of the big room. She closed the doors and hid behind some clothes, all the time thinking how somebody would have gotten inside. She remembered that the garage door was cracked for the cat, slightly but not close enough for a thin person to slip under. Tim walks into the bedroom. Tim is tall and thin. She can see him through the slatted closet doors. She saw that he was holding a knife and did everything she could to not scream. He quickly went to the master bedroom where she was just moments before. These cookie-cutter houses only had about 3 floor plan layouts, so it wasn't hard for him to find. He looked inside the bathroom and didn't see her, then started making loud throaty noises like somebody would if they were frustrated. While pacing the entire house, she stayed in the closet for hours, even after she heard him exit through the front door. She stayed until her mom got home. She was crying hysterically and told her mom what happened. Had she not been so upset and had one of their kitchen knives not been left by the front door, her mom might have blamed it on being delirious from a high fever, because nobody would expect Tim to do this. The police were called and an official report filed. I'm not sure if he had any charges pressed against him, because after she told me the story once, she refused to talk about it again. I overheard her parents a few times talking about the situation, with my own parents, but never heard what the consequences were. He was so traumatized she went to therapy afterward for several years, and still wouldn't talk to anyone about it because she didn't want to remember or relive the experience. We even moved into an apartment together years and years later for college purposes. She never talked about Tim. It was like he never existed, and I never asked. I noticed she always locked the front door, which she should, of course. Always locked the door that led to the patio/balcony, even though we were on the 7th level, and always locked her bedroom door, onto which she added an additional lock. And when she locked all of those doors and the windows, she always checked like 3 times. Every single time. I often wonder if there was more to the story than what he told me. We were kids after all, and sometimes kids don't know how to explain things they don't understand. It's terrifying to think about what his intentions were, and if he perhaps did find E, and something else happened. As horrifying as the experience must have been for her, he made a huge statement in the neighborhood for everyone to be more careful. I will always make sure everything is locked, and I don't ever want to meet you again, Tim. This story extends from 8th grade middle school to my freshman year in college. I'm 24 years old now, so this must have begun in 2008. I was raised in a Korean household with strong Christian beliefs. Every summer and winter, there would be a youth retreat where all the teens in our church would go to one big joint retreat with counselors and teenagers from churches in and out of state. I met my best friend, Hannah, there. She was from Philly and had a pastor who was named Alan. After these retreats, everybody would add each other on Facebook and keep in touch. I remember a day or two after the '08 summer retreat, Pastor Allen would often reach out and ask how my walk with God was going since the retreat and if I ever needed someone to speak to. I could always confide in him. This didn't alarm me at the time because counselors would keep in touch all the time. I always kept our conversations brief considering the fact that I was shy and timid. Over the years, I'd always see Pastor Allen at retreats and was friendly with him. Nothing strange happened other than his persistence with keeping in touch with me on Facebook after retreats. I slowly stopped talking to him, and eventually we didn't speak at all. But this is where it gets weird. One day, after our summer retreat in 2011, I got a friend request from a woman named Sumiko. I noticed we had a lot of mutual friends from the retreat, so I assumed she was a counselor there. She messaged me immediately after I accepted the request. She and I became quickly acquainted. At the time, I was 15, and she was everything I needed in an older sister. Although we never met, I let my naivety get to me and confided in her about my teenage girl troubles. After months in, I remember walking into church and asking one of my youth leaders if they met a Sumiko at the retreat. He said he never heard of her. I asked him if he could check the roster, and he did, only to find out there was no Sumiko on the list. That's when things started to get super eerie for me. I panicked and went home to block Sumi on my Facebook. I saw on her page that the only person who continued to tell her it was nice seeing her was Pastor Allen. Nobody else from the retreat seemed to really be interacting with her. It all started to freak me out. I blocked her and unfriended Pastor Allen. I remember no longer attending these church retreats. A few days later, I received an email telling me that Sumiko was going through a hard time because of me, and that the email is coming from the mental hospital that she was staying at. They told me it was all my fault. I was a junior in high school under high amounts of stress from SATs, and I deleted the email because I just wanted to forget about it all and focus on studying. Shortly after, I started to receive really unfriendly anonymous messages on my Tumblr. They would tell me that I was going to burn in hell for eternity if I continued to stray from God, and they continued all the way into my senior year in high school. I always deleted and ignored them, or I'd reply sarcastically and laugh at them with my friends. Eventually the messages faded and I didn't hear much from them anymore. In 2012, I got accepted to a close-by Christian college, and I moved into my dorm. My dorm floor decided to have a little icebreaker meeting to help us get comfortable. I met another Korean girl and we began talking about our similarities in our childhood, being raised Korean with Christian parents. I opened up to her about my encounter with Pastor Allen, and midway through the story, I saw her face slowly dropping and getting pale. She told me she had a very similar encounter with a pastor she knew, and that he seemed like it might be the same man working with the youth in an all-Korean church. I asked where she was from, and she replied with the same state that Pastor Allen was from. She then asked me if the name of the pastor was Allen. We had the same predator in our lives at the same age. I'm not sure where Allen is now, but I hope that he has not harmed any little Korean girls, or anyone for that matter. It's absolutely disgusting. He was borderline 60 years old when I was 14 to 15. It makes me sick knowing people prey on children in the most vulnerable ways. It ruined a lot of my perspective on Christianity as well. It's horrible to take something so spiritual and take advantage of a child with it. So, Pastor Allen, with a creepy young Asian girl fetish. Let's never meet again. Okay, so this just happened to me, female 28, and I'm sure I will not be able to sleep. My boyfriend is not answering the phone, and I need to get this out. My company organized an event for the clients and the staff at a luxury hotel. Everybody partied, and I got into my room an hour ago. It's 3:27 in the morning here. Like, I don't know, 15 minutes ago, a guy entered my room with a bottle of water. It woke me up. I was super scared. He says that somebody came from my room to order a bottle of sparkling water. Weird explanation. There is a minibar, and there is a corridor in the room before entering where I am in the bed. So basically I am half naked in my bed. He comes closer to me at the level of the table, apologizing for the inconvenience, but he is still there, and I kid you not, he starts talking to me, saying how he is going to be in trouble and stuff, and how someone called and he is so sorry, and the others got in the hotel super drunk, and it must have been a mistake. I swear he had been standing super close to my bed for 5 minutes, and I was so shocked. I was just saying, no, it's okay. I just got scared. Really, no problem. Just go. Well, he says he doesn't see me well and asks my name. Twice, he says. Well, so I guess I wish you a good night then. Then kisses me on the cheek, like we French do, but once again, I'm half naked in my bed, dead scared, and he is in a suit, all dressed. Literally, I don't even know what I could have done. He left after the longest minute saying how he was sorry and how he would appreciate that I don't tell anyone. And now the phone in the room just rang. I don't know if I should still be scared. Was he just confused by the mistake? I'm super scared, though I cannot think right now and my heart is racing. I need to have some rational feedback after this, really. Update 1. I am okay, by the way, 34 hours later. So this is a story that happened to my mom's friends in Korea like 10 years ago. Every time I hear this story, I still get the chills. My mom's friend lived in an apartment complex in Seoul. She was a stay-at-home mother with a young daughter, and her husband worked during the days. One day, she was coming home from running errands with her daughter and got into the elevator in her building. When she got on, she noticed that there was a man wearing a cap and a yellow raincoat, and he kept his head low so that she couldn't really see his face. She immediately felt really uneasy and made her daughter stand to her side, furthest away from the man. What made her feel even more uncomfortable was that when she pressed the button for her floor, there was no other lit number. And on top of that, she noticed that she was carrying something wrapped inside newspaper close to his side. Things started to click in my mom's friend's head, and she started to panic and decided to take out her cell phone and pretend she was calling home to her husband, who was obviously really not at home and at work. She started saying things like, "Oh, I'm on the elevator and about to get off. Can you get the door for me?" And making it seem like her husband was waiting at home. When the elevator did reach her floor, I think she lived on like the 12th floor or something, she quickly got off and grabbed her daughter and started to walk as fast as she could to her apartment. She noticed that the man also got off on her floor and was slowly following her down the hallway. When my mom's friend got to her door, she started to bang on it and shout, "Hey, I'm home. Please open the door," and kind of pretended like he was coming to answer the door. Upon seeing this, the man in the yellow raincoat started to walk away back towards the elevator. When he seemed to be far away enough, my mom's friend quickly picked up her daughter and slid open the door's passcode thingy. This is usually how people get into their homes in Korea, and started to frantically punch in her key code. But the problem was that the buttons would make sounds, so the man knew that nobody was going to answer the door for her, and he turned around and started to run back towards her. My mom's friend at this point was practically screaming, and when she finally got her door to open, the first thing she did was throw her daughter in through the door. When she got in herself, she saw that the man was pretty much inches from the door, but she managed to shut it and lock it before he could wedge his hand or weapon into the door. Afterwards, looking through the door's peephole, she saw that the man was walking away back towards the elevator. Several months later, my mom's friend was watching the news, and there was coverage of the capture of a serial killer named Yoo Young-chul, who used to kill a lot of prostitutes. She told my mom that she could never forget the dread she felt when she saw the too familiar yellow raincoat and hat that he was wearing when apprehended. A couple of years back, I lived for about a year and a half in Moscow. I mostly madly loved that city. I was studying Russian, and naturally I fell in with a group of my fellow English Russian students and expats. It didn't do my liver any favors since we went out and sampled the chaotic nightlife at least once a week, often more often. I'm not a massive party animal, and I can't stomach going home in the wee hours of the morning all the time, so often I'd catch the last train home rather than go to clubs and stay out till 5. A few quick facts for those not familiar with Moscow. 1. There are very strange people in that city sometimes. Man, I really love that place, but there are some proper oddballs. 2. The last metro train runs at about 1:30 a.m. I think. Unless you catch that, you've either got to try your luck with taxis or walk or wait until the morning trains and get in with the commuters. I'm a cheapskate, and getting the metro was always easier and cheaper. 3. Moscow Metro is legendarily complicated and weirdly organized and intimidating. It's also very kind of creepy at 1 a.m. when, for a bustling metropolis outside the city center, there aren't many people hanging around in the station. Those big, grand Stalinist halls, totally devoid of anyone else. Bloody freaky. Like the setting of some weird dystopian futuristic zombie thing or something. Always gave me the heebie-jeebies. I should also add that for some strange reason, the men there seemed to think I was a member of the sex industry often. This was mainly a problem in the winter months because maybe the women don't risk the minus temperatures at 2 a.m. Just kidding. Maybe just because, I don't know, I spent most of the time dressed like Scott of the Antarctic and trying not to faceplant on black ice, none of which screams prostitute to most people, but So onto the weirdo. I'd been out to the bars with my friends, and since I had planned a big sightseeing day the next day, I bailed on going to the clubs and headed home. I had a few friends who lived on the same line, but this night they were all going on a proper night out, so I thought, screw it, and braved a boring metro ride home alone. Going home started happily, merrily, drunkenly hopped onto a train, and it was quiet, but not too quiet. A couple of merrymakers out and about, but I got a seat with loads of space in a relatively quiet car, and I kind of zoned out for a few moments. Our antagonist got on at the next stop. He was a very big man, heavy set, but also generally huge, and he stood near the doors. I don't know why, I just kind of ended up spacing out in his direction. I was drunk, alright, but I did end up staring a little bit, not paying attention, just waiting for my stop. Gradually, though, I noticed he had this pool of pinkish, reddish, watery stuff collecting in drips around his feet. Like, you know, the stuff you get in a packet of meat. My brain processed this as blood at first, so I stared like an idiot, wondering if this man was injured or something. When I looked up, I made embarrassing eye contact and realized two things. The liquid was leaking from his shitty, battered-looking backpack he was carrying. Seriously, who carries leaking meat in a backpack? And he was also staring at me. I looked away. He came to sit in the opposite seat from me, still staring. I only had to wait one stop for the station I had to change lines at, but it was the most damn uncomfortable wait I've had for a long time. He stared at me the whole time with something my brain can't decide was a weird rape or assault face or a want to hurt you face, since I was too scared to properly look at him. My station came. I got off the train. Meat Man followed, which I shrugged off. Maybe he lives at this stop, I said to myself. To be sure he wasn't following me because he made me massively uncomfortable, I took a very counterintuitive and convoluted path to the platform I needed to catch the last train from, even at the risk of missing it. Fortunately, this station was quite busy and full of guards for some reason, or I might have freaked out a bit here and then. I genuinely took the most stupid time-consuming trip of the platform I could think of. I looked over my shoulder a lot. I kid you not, he followed me every step of the way, step after leaking step. I tried everything to shake this man. When my train arrived, I got into one car, dived off, and ran into another, running like a lunatic to avoid missing it. He somehow followed me. I pretended to not get off at the next stop, the station before my station. He started to follow but didn't buy it. All I could think of is, wow, I'm going to be killed by the Russian equivalent of the Midnight Meat Train Man. This can't be happening. I purposely avoided even looking at him. I didn't want to miss my stop, so I jumped off the train like a crazy person. Again, luck was not on my side because that jerk must have the reflexes of a cat. My station was one of the ones that was genuinely really quiet, like a freaking tomb, and it creeped me out the best of times. To make it worse, the easiest way home was through one of those convoluted Moscow metro overpasses. I decided to do the stupid thing and ignore this man, just go about my business and hope he went away. Halfway through the underpass, this man was still following me with his drippy bag and his crazed, unfocused eyes and his weird rape murder face. And Dutch courage kicked in. I was pretty spooked out by this man, but I was also really upset and angry. Suddenly, like really mad. What I did next was stupid, but it is a lighthearted end to the story of the scary Moscow Metro Man. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. It probably won't work most of the time. I wouldn't try it on anyone or anything else. For example, bears. Yeah, so please don't try this on bears. I was also really drunk, which is probably why I thought screw it and decided to do it. Aware that this man was still following me and closing in and genuinely being very stalky now, I turned around and shouted, "If you don't leave me alone, I will murder you," and other things to that extent in a drunken mix of Russian and English. I kind of had a very special kind of alcohol and fear-fueled temper tantrum, which involved jumping and feeling like a crazy person, swearing and throwing my shoes at him. You know, out crazy the crazy. Eventually, I managed to get him to piss off enough to make a getaway, and put enough distance between us that I managed to lose him. Worth looking like an idiot for, I reckon. I don't know why he was following me or what was in that damn bag, that leaking stuff, or why he looked so mad. He might have been drunk, maybe, and I know my imagination takes me down a dark route when I think about it. Maybe I was lucky to not be found face down in a ditch or something. Maybe he had truly horrible plans and I made it too much hassle to be worth the payoff. Maybe there was something properly nasty in that minky looking backpack. I'll never know and I don't want to. On the other hand, he was scared off by a drunken woman waving her arms like a helicopter, shouting threats and throwing her shoes around, so maybe he was just, I don't know, mildly creepy and not much of a threat at all. Again, I'll never know. But that's the story of the Moscow Meat Man. Hope it wasn't too long. I'd like to share with you a series of horrific events from my childhood that we never had a real resolution to. There were some suspects, but nobody was ever brought to justice. Also, there has been a lot of terrible things happen to my mom's property, and that's another story, but here's part of the beginning. This part of the story happened roughly around 1990 during my summer break from school, but continued on for quite some time. I must have been about 2nd or 3rd grade age, and I grew up with just my mom, because my dad was never in the picture, so we lived alone until I was about 12, when she remarried. Our secluded country neighborhood was safe for the most part, and all of our immediate neighbors were elderly, save for one couple who had a few young adult sons around my brother's age. For the most part, though, there wasn't much riffraff in the area. At first, there were only minor clues to indicate something was going on, such as things being moved in the backyard, and I guess because my mother was always being paranoid, and definitely a conspiracy theorist, she always had an idea that something was happening. I didn't really know this until I heard her talking about it much later after the events. She tried to hide things so they wouldn't scare me. She even started sleeping in my room with me at night, probably because she was paranoid, but I assumed it was because we could stay up late and watch movies together and eat snacks. One morning after I got up, I noticed that our old wooden back door had huge chunks missing out of it around the part where the lock/bolt goes into the door frame. It was as if somebody were trying to chip away at the locked part. I showed Mom what I had discovered, not realizing why the door was damaged, and she went completely silent, pale-faced and panicked. I could tell something was wrong, but I was too young to understand that somebody had apparently tried to break in, either in the night or when we were out. That day, she mended the door to the best of her ability, and if I remember correctly, she even put a new lock on it from the hardware store. She also filed a police report, but there was nothing they could do. I had a German Shepherd named Munchie. He was a big, spoiled baby who loved raiding the fridge with me, but to a stranger, he was probably very intimidating. He was also my best friend and very watchful over me, and I miss him to this day. For a week or two, after Mom and I would go to bed, Munchie would start pacing and whining and acting very anxious. Since we lived in such a rural place with no imminent danger, we thought, Mom would frequently let him outside by himself, so one night when he was acting exceptionally strange, she let him outside alone. We didn't have central air because our house was old, built in the 50s. We were very poor and Kentucky summers weren't really too hot anyways. At night, Mom would open all the windows in the house, with the halfway burglar latch of course. Since she was in my room with me watching a movie, we had both my bedroom windows all the way open. My back window overlooked a bit of a hill which gradually sloped into a low, wide bottom. The bottom was full of tall weeds and bushes. Suddenly, we heard movement in the brush of the bottom. Munchie. Then we heard him snarling like a werewolf. Mom got up and ran to the window but couldn't see anything. What we heard next was horrifying. It sounded as if Munchie was attacking someone. He was making those awful noises as if he were eating somebody alive. I began to cry, terrified that something would happen to my best friend, and my mom started screaming in horror for Munchie to come home. We heard what sounded like somebody escaping my dog's wrath and taking off through the brush. Mom ran to the back door with me right behind her and called for Munchie at the top of her lungs, until he came running back into the house. He was panting and grunting and bristled up. I hugged him so tight, I probably nearly squeezed the life out of him. As time progressed, things got worse. Being so young, I didn't know for a long time, but my mom was safeguarding the house. She even moved a full tall dresser in front of my window that overlooked the hill in the bottom. She tried her best, but whoever was harassing us was finding new ways to make our life miserable, or maybe try to kill us. One night, she said that she heard peculiar noises coming from the backyard. I don't necessarily remember this, so I called her for details before writing this. Sounds were coming from under the dining room windows, which overlooked the backyard. She turned on the security light on the back of the house and saw a ladder propped up against the back of our house, as if somebody were trying to climb through our windows. This incident seemed more like an empty threat than a real attempt, especially considering the back door was probably easier access. We don't know if the person thought the windows would be unlocked or what, but for whatever reason, they gave it a try. Again, she called our local police and they did nothing. I should probably note that we didn't really have much law enforcement there. You probably wouldn't believe me if I tried to tell you how worthless law enforcement was, and still is in that area. On another occasion, and this memory is burned into my brain because it scared me so bad, somebody snuck up to my bedroom window one night. I hate to even think what their intentions might have been. Mom had drifted off to sleep, but I was quietly watching the rest of Willy Wonka. I was looking in the direction of my ominous window, the one overlooking the bottom, so I ended up getting a good look at this big white hand which reached up and slapped my window screen multiple times, in rapid succession. I screamed. Mom woke up and the tormentor took off, no doubt through the brushy bottom. My mom is a dog person. She adores dogs and always had lots of dogs and puppies around. We had 7 little black pups and the mother dog around this time, and they lived outside on our huge property, had plenty of space to play, and had a very nice big doghouse. At some point around the same time this stuff was happening, we had to be out of town for a few days. Mom had some people watching the house, and I guess she didn't really think anything horrendous could happen. Then again, she wasn't aware of how far this would go. When we came home, Mom's puppies had been killed and lined up in a row in the side yard, close to my window that overlooked the bottom. This was obviously absolutely devastating. The police did little to help, which included telling her how short to saw off her shotgun so that I was still legal and advising us to keep Munchie in the house. I forgot to ask, but I'm nearly positive that my mom ended up sending the mommy dog away to my sister's house on the other side of town. Months later, incidents were increasing in occurrence, and then somebody decided to take it way too far. Something hitting the back of the house in the wee hours of the morning. Mom looked out the windows and saw nothing, at least not until the next morning. She found a stick with a charred pine knot on it. Somebody had apparently lit it on fire and threw it at our house. I assumed they were hoping our house would burn. And don't even ask about the cops because they did nothing yet again. I wouldn't be surprised if they knew who the culprit was and just didn't care. Then one day, Munchie went missing. He had gone out to the bathroom in the evening before bed, but he didn't come back immediately like always. He vanished. I don't even want to go into detail about this because it breaks my heart all over again, but we found him days later. He had been poisoned. To be completely honest, I could keep going with this story. Although it takes a lot of unbelievable turns, not all of them are horrifying. Some are just ridiculous. Then around 2009, a multiple-year-long court case began where my mom had to fight a group of her neighbors in court to keep them from stealing her property. Those events led to us believing that the people involved with that case may have had something to do with the torment we experienced all those years ago. But really all we can do is assume. So, tormentor, I wish we could meet, but you are a coward who harasses women and children and hurts animals. My cousin lived with me and my husband for about 3 or 4 months while she was looking for a new place, as she and her boyfriend recently split up. Tina was very helpful, and there would be a number of times that I'd come home from work and see that she's already making dinner for all of us, has cleaned the kitchen, or has ironed. She started seeing this guy called Mark, and I personally didn't like him and thought she could do better, but my husband convinced me into giving him a chance. Tina would text us and ask if it's okay if Mark could come over and stay, or if Mark could come to dinner, and I had to fight back the urge to say no, but I said our house is now her house, so she is welcome anytime. Each time I met him, I knew something wasn't right with him, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but I always had some creepy vibe. He always seemed to stare too much or would try and come up with weird topics to talk about over dinner. While I'm eating, I'd rather not talk about how much bleach it would take to kill someone. As I said, very weird things. Small items started going missing, and it was small things. Like some buttons came off my husband's jacket, so I got some new ones that matched the others the best I could and placed them on the side. I came home and they were nowhere to be seen, and the household said they didn't pick them up. My husband even joked around that the borrowers have it again. On payday, I decided to go and get some new clothes from a shop here, as I didn't want to spend that much. I usually grab some funny underwear, by the way. And by funny, I mean underwear with Family Guy or the Cookie Monster on them, and try and find some matching bras to go with it. I grabbed what I wanted, and putting everything away, I started dinner. A few weeks went by and I was just getting changed, and I opened my drawer and my Cookie Monster bra was there. I suddenly remembered that I have matching underwear, and I'm laughing to myself, wondering what my husband will say when he finds out that I've got Cookie Monster underwear. I honestly couldn't find my stuff anywhere. I tipped my drawer out and went through it all, and I couldn't find them still. I obviously did buy them, as I had the bra's proof. I even looked in the bag in case I somehow left them in there. Feeling a bit let down and confused, I got dressed and carried on with my day. Fast forward a few more weeks, and my husband had my car for the day, as he had a meeting a few hours away. I walked to work, and I was on my way walking back from work when I heard a beep and a car pull up. Looking inside, I see Mark. "Hey, need a ride?" Yes please. Thank you very much." I get in the car and casually throw my work bag in the back seat and just turn around to say thank you again to Mark. And I said thankfully he showed up, as I didn't think I could handle walking back to work. Trying to make a joke of the situation. He drops me off at my house, and I pull the seat forward and grab my bag while he gets out, as my cousin is at home. I'm grabbing my bag, and some deodorant has fallen out, and some cookies I was saving in my bag are now in the footwell. I reach my bag under and wait to grab my things when I grab a small plastic bag. Looking inside, I see my Cookie Monster underwear, the missing buttons, a photo of me and my husband, and a used toothbrush of mine that I had to replace, and even a small collection of my false nails I was wearing once. I ended up pulling them all off, as I couldn't find the missing ones to replace the ones that had fallen off. Mark, why is my stuff in your car?" Right as I said that, I stepped slowly backwards from the car and reached for my phone to call my husband. Mark straight away jumps in his car, and we haven't seen him since. I told my cousin about it, and she said that he always used to go to the toilet for ages, and they joked all of the time about him having a water infection or that he didn't like her cooking. I walked into the bathroom at my community college, and there was another guy in there, and he was at one of the two urinals. I walk in and step up to the other urinal, and from the moment I walked in to the moment I unzipped my pants, this guy was staring directly at me. In my head I thought, maybe this guy's on the spectrum or something, because our college has a lot of students that are special needs and is a great place for them to get a degree and has really good programs to work with them. So it felt off, but I thought maybe it's nothing. I only wished that this was where the interaction ended. He finished before me and went over to wash his hands. I was just waiting for him to finish up and leave the bathroom because it felt really weird. While I'm still at the urinal and this guy is washing his hands, he looks at me and says, "You're a complete stranger, so you won't judge me. Is it wrong of me to take out my anger on people I don't know?" My first thought was, this guy isn't right, but I should probably listen. But I answered and said, "No, that's not right. That isn't healthy for you or the other person." He answers, "That's the conclusion I've come to as well. Thanks." And then he turns and walks out of the bathroom without even drying his hands. I don't know about that guy. I have a bad feeling about him, and I don't know what to do about this situation. So, bathroom guy, I hope you get the help you need, but let's never meet again. Edit. From all the replies, it seems most people are just as confused as I was. Some say this guy could have been dangerous or unstable. That was kind of the vibe I initially had. Some say that this could have been a question that somebody with a mental illness would ask, not aware of social norms and with no ill intent. That could very well have been it too. Personally, I hope it was the latter, and I hope I don't see him on the news for doing something horrible one day. This encounter was not too long ago and solidified in my mind why I will always close the blinds at night and why even in a quiet suburban neighborhood, you should always lock your door. I've been reading creepy stories online since I was probably 12, when I first discovered Tumblr and Reddit, creepypasta, no sleep, and of course, let's not meet. So, I have long since taken to checking to all windows and locks before I go to bed, and closing blinds and curtains for fear that I might look out to see some creep in a clown costume with a knife in my garden, or a person with their head at an unnatural angle. I always sort of wished I had a creepy encounter so I could write about it, but if I never have another experience like this for the rest of my life, it will be too soon. So, context. This nice suburban neighborhood, as I say, is the home of my parents. A little town in Cheshire, England, a quiet street where we all knew each other. Low crime rate except for one house, which has been broken into and robbed twice in about 10 years. Both opportunistic. Once because the keys were near the door and the invader smashed a small pane to reach them and let themselves in. The other time, they left their blinds open overnight, leaving their laptops, wallets, and both car keys on full display. Anyways, I don't live with my parents anymore, but I was back in town and staying with them for a few days over summer. I was sitting in the kitchen, which faces onto the street, and working on my laptop, just glancing up occasionally to watch people pass by walking dogs or strolling with the pram. I'd seen something moving in my periphery, so, like every time, I looked up hoping to see a dog walker or one neighbor and her newborn grandson. Nope, two people. A man in a semi-casual suit and a woman in plain jeans and a blouse. But they were moving weirdly. The woman had her head craned over to one of her shoulders and her arm on that side was bent backwards and unnaturally upwards with her hand rhythmically flicking. Her other arm randomly but smoothly glided about, guided by her elbow. It was a bit like when you try and push two magnets together at the same point of polarity. That's how I would describe it. I have friends with epilepsy and I have never seen them contort or flick like that. Not even their myoclonic jerks. The man looked more like one of those dancing inflatables you see at a used car dealership. That's the only way I could describe his movements. They walked past my parents' house and I instinctively called to my cat to check he wasn't outside with those weirdos. Found him upstairs in my old room. He was looking out the window, and as I followed his gaze, I saw two of the kid neighbors in that house that had been robbed multiple times waving across to me. Well, to my cat, but I waved back. All the same, from their parents' upstairs bedroom window. I went downstairs to tell my parents about the strange moving people, and my dad just furrowed his brow, asked if they were gone, and said to double check that the door was locked. I headed back to the kitchen to check if our back door was locked. This door doesn't have any windows in it, so you can understand I jumped out of my skin when, as I put my hand on the door handle, it was pushed down by somebody on the other side. I pushed the door immediately, before anybody could push it from outside. I also must scream because I hear my dad call back. I hear his footsteps coming through the house and then I hear a loud gasp on the other side of the door and out of the kitchen window. Guess who I see making a threat? Creepy moving dude and dudette. By the time my dad made it through the house, they're gone. He doesn't seem to believe me, although he also doesn't seem to doubt either. He's never seen them before and takes a free pop at me for being discriminatory against potential house guests with movement disorders. We make jokes like this because I had a movement disorder as a kid, and one time a parent wouldn't let me into her son's birthday party because they would be playing Simon Says and I made it difficult for the other kids. I digress. Anyways, these people were gone. I don't sleep well, due to that movement disorder actually. And those scary stories I read meant that I always listened to the excessive creaking in this house and noises on the street outdoors at night, like people walking home drunk and foxes mating. Most of the sounds are quiet though, so imagine my shock when my straining ears are suddenly attacked by a child's scream. It takes me a second to locate the sound and another to lurch from my bed to the window, looking straight over to the upstairs window, the same one where not 12 hours ago my neighbor's children were waving to me from. I scanned down the house and saw their front door wide open. I shouted for my parents, hoping to wake them up as I flew down the stairs in my PJs, with 999 already dialed on my phone to report this likely home invasion before I do anything else. I'm remembering to scream fire, not burglar, as I stride across the road, attempting to wake up other neighbors and gather support. There are two kids and a teenager in that commonly broken into house, kids who I babysat for 10 years, and one of them just screamed at 2 a.m. when their front door was wide open. I make sure I say this out loud to the emergency responder on the phone. As I near the door, I can see a figure inside moving frantically. So after telling the phone responder what is happening and answering their brief questions, I shout into the door from a safe distance, some phrases the police gave me to say. The police are on their way. We are right outside and we're getting help. Is anybody hurt? And to tell the intruders, we know you are there. Please do not hurt anyone. The police can help you. I get a response from the upstairs window and step back into the road to see a mother holding all three kids in her arms, and she tells me the middle child, who's 9, found intruders on the stairs when she went to get a drink in the night. The girl, Imogen, tells me they're like clowns. Clowns. This extra detail is the straw that broke the camel's back, and my vision darkens. Shit, I'm going to pass out. The last thing I hear is Emmy telling her mom I said a bad word. I came to in the middle of the road with a foil blanket on and a soft Octonauts toy under my head. I could see lots of blue lights, 3 police cars and an ambulance. That's one for me, and I can see my neighbors out of the corner of my eye. My hearing returns as Emmy tells me her little brother volunteered his toy because I hit my head when I fainted. Suddenly, I'm up and looking around to count all 5 of the family members and checking for injury. Over the top of their heads, I can see an arm frantically waving in and out of view. Yep, moving weirdos broke into my neighbor's house. I see the woman is standing still, her head still slumped to the side, just as she's been lowered into a police car. I was later told that as I spoke to my neighbors out their bedroom window, their dad had gone to fight the intruders and kicked the woman down the stairs as she was climbing them. The man was the frantically moving shadow I had seen from the doorway. Police reckon that they had been trying doors down our street and found one unlocked. I told them about the couple trying our door earlier in the afternoon. I'm guided to the ambulance and sit on the bed while the paramedics tend to a large cut on the back of my head from my fall. I vaguely feel them removing gravel, cleaning, gluing, and dressing it, but I'm preoccupied watching 2 police try to contain the human dancing inflatable man. They can't catch both arms at the same time to cuff him, so eventually, one policeman is cuffed to one of the man's hands and thus has his arm flung every which way as the man continues to move. I have no idea what they've been tried with, if they were on drugs or had a movement disorder. My dad and I do have a small bet on this matter, or when the court hearing is yet, but as a key witness, I'll be told when they need me in court. But I would happily go the rest of my life without hearing a kid scream at 2 a.m. and seeing those 2 weird moving creeps. So, creepy dancing dude and dudette, that's not me. When I was in grade school, my family lived in a house that sat directly across from the school I attended. However, there was about a half a mile of wooded area between them. I was allowed to walk to and from school because it was so straightforward. My mom informed me that she and her siblings walked through the woods to school when they were younger, so it felt like a natural and safe thing for her. I loved the excitement of being able to walk to school all on my own, and I felt pretty at home in the woods, as I had been raised around them. The walk was pretty direct, with very few issues aside from a small but wide creek that I had to cross. The creek itself was no problem. It was the fact that on each side there was a steep bank that had to be scaled. It wasn't too terrible unless it had been raining. It had rained the day before, so my steps, which were normally loud, were fairly silent. This might have saved my life. It at least saved me from something terrible. When I reached the creek, I was in my own little world. I was thinking about a science project that we had to do at school and whether or not I was fully prepared for my part in it. I was doing the supernova section and wasn't feeling very ready to make a speech in front of everyone, explaining it. Anyways, I reached the creek and dropped down the first bank with a slightly wet thud. I crossed over the water and began looking for something to grab a hold of to pull myself up with. There were usually roots sticking out to use. Before I could climb up the other side, I heard a noise, like people talking. I stopped and waited to see if I heard it again, and I did. I heard a couple of boys talking, getting closer to me. I smashed myself up against the bank and listened for a minute. I don't know why, but something just told me to stay away, that something was wrong. The boys came so close, all the way to the edge of the creek bank, but they didn't jump down. If they had, they would have seen me in a flash. As luck would have it, there was an overhang that I was able to hide under. I listened as the boys talked. Yeah, she comes through here all the time. Should be coming around in just a minute. My heart sank. I was the only person that walked this trail to and from school, and they were in my direct path. That isn't to say that no one else was ever in the woods, but in all the time that I used this trail, I had never seen another person. To get to the woods from my house, I had to cross the road and walk through a small flat area with no trees, and from the school side, I had to walk through the school's football field. Anybody from either side could have seen me going in or out of the woods easily. I stood plastered to the wall of mud, waiting for them to catch me, but they walked around a little bit, smoked a few cigarettes, and started getting frustrated. Where the heck is she, man? Said she would be here, so where is she? Maybe she didn't go to school today. Anyways, we gotta go or we're gonna miss our bus. The high schoolers caught their bus to the high school to elementary school. This told me 2 things. 1, they were obviously in high school. so much older than me, and 2, they had some seriously bad intentions toward me. I heard them leaving, but I didn't dare move. I waited a good 30 minutes or so before I darted out of the creek bed and toward home. I'll never know exactly what those boys had planned to do to me that day, and I'm not sure I want to. In December 2018, my ex and I split up after 7 years in a relationship. I was new to the dating game, so I didn't want to jump into it. In February, I met a guy at the bar that we frequent. The second time I met him, we exchanged numbers. By the end of March, I was feeling pretty comfortable and invited him to a party at my house. He stayed after the party, and one thing led to another. Well, after it was all said and done, I had a weird vibe. He was too pushy, and it made me uncomfortable, so I asked him to leave. I planned to never speak to him again, that is, until he started to text me from random numbers. He would say things like, "Hope you have fun fishing," when I didn't post on any social media that I was fishing. "I hope the movie was good," when I hadn't posted anything online that I was at the movies. He would text me and ask where in the bar I was at different bars, when I had never told anyone or posted where we were going. We had no mutual friends, so he was following me. The final straw was when my friends took me to Washington, D.C. for my 25th birthday celebration. We bar hopped all over the city. Around 2:30 a.m., we came out of the last bar we were at and decided to get cookies across the street. As we were coming out of the cookie shop, guess who pops up? You guessed it. He does. He goes, "I hope such and such were fun. I wanted to say hi earlier, but since you haven't been replying to my messages, I didn't want to freak you out." Yeah, safe to say I was terrified now. My friend's husband thankfully stepped in and called him out and threatened to call the police. I changed my number and moved. Thankfully, I haven't heard from him since, so to the guy I mistakenly had my first ever one-night stand with, let's never meet again. Update. After all the comments saying that I should still contact the police, that he could still be stalking me, I decided that it was best to do that. I contacted my local police, and they advised me to contact the police where I lived previously. I did so, and I still live close enough that I went on Tuesday to file the paperwork for a restraining order. Thankfully, I know his full name and place of employment, so they will be able to locate him. I provided all the text messages and screenshots that I have, and now we wait for him to be served. It will be a temporary 15-day restraining order. It will be extended because our local courthouse docket is on a stacked schedule due to the virus, so once we've been given a court date, we will go. I was told by the sheriff that it shouldn't be an issue getting a judge to approve a restraining order for 2 years, with all the evidence that I have and the testimony from my friends who witnessed these events. Thank you for the advice. This happened to me a few years ago while I was still in college, but I've been watching a ton of those narrated true stories on YouTube, and I felt compelled to share my own experience. For some context, I'm Irish, and I was studying in the UK to get my bachelor's degree. I don't know how common this is elsewhere, but where I lived, it seemed to be more common enough that landlords renting to students privately would convert the front downstairs room into an extra bedroom. This is where my bedroom was for my first year. I didn't mind it too much, but it was a bit weird having the front door directly in my room. Especially since, for those who aren't familiar with terraced houses in the UK, there isn't a front garden usually, and we just had a small section separating the front door from the path outside. By now, I'd been living here for a few months, and I could recognize the difference in the sound of somebody walking past on the path and the sound of someone stepping towards the front door. On the night that this happened, I was totally alone in the house, as both my housemates were away from home for the weekend. This was a little bit unusual since neither of them usually went home except for special occasions, but I think it might have been Valentine's Day around that time or something similar. It was around 1 in the morning, and I was lying in bed and on the phone with my boyfriend at the time as we were long distance. As we were talking, I could hear some footsteps outside, and I immediately recognized that it was somebody right outside the door. I kept listening, and I could hear them shuffling around a bit, and then they started fumbling with the door handle. That spooked me, and I told my boyfriend that I was going to have a look out the window to see if I could spot whoever it was. I got up and part the curtains and quite literally pressed my face and hands against the window to get a look outside, since it was pitch black by now and the street lights had been turned off. It took a second then for me to realize what I was looking at, but Whoever it was who was outside was doing the same exact thing I was, pressed up against the window and staring in at me inches away. I didn't scream. I just felt as if all the wind had been knocked out of me, as I remember feeling like somebody had just dunked me into a pool of ice water. Whoever it was looked to be male. Couldn't see his face properly, but I just remember he was wearing a hoodie. He ran when he saw me, and after trying to collect myself, I quickly told my boyfriend and then rang the police. I don't remember how long it took for them to get there, but there wasn't a whole lot they could do. I think they might have done a quick patrol of the area, but nothing ever came of it. It was absolutely one of the most terrifying things that's happened to me, as I can't figure out at all why he was trying to break in. At the time I had my light on, which would have been visible from the window even with the curtains drawn, so I figured I could rule out that he was a junkie or squatter looking for a place to crash. I don't know if maybe he'd been watching me and my housemates for a while, but seeing 3 girls living alone and thought maybe this would make an easy burglary, or worse. But I am thankful I didn't have any trouble again afterwards. I couldn't sleep for days after, and I remember staying up until early morning, just watching movies on my laptop to feel less alone until I eventually fell asleep from exhaustion, once it started to get light outside. Since I was here from Ireland, I didn't even have any family members close by who I could call for or go and stay with, and it was the most agonizingly long weekend of my life waiting for my housemates to come back. I definitely think I've developed a slight phobia now of looking out the window while it's still dark outside. Now, before you bite my head off, yes, I know I have posted this story before. My reason for reposting is that the story has since been archived, and I have sort of a massive update to it that I really wanted to add. This morning, I was going through a really old hard drive and discovered a folder. The folder was named Kearney. In it was proof to validate parts of the story. So then people can hopefully stop accusing me of having made it up. I apologize for the awful quality of the pictures because these were taken back in 2007 with my video camera stills feature. So, hi everyone. Lately, I've had some requests to finally share the whole story of the homeless man I accidentally took in as a tenant and the incidents that followed. I'm just saying in advance, this is kind of a long one, but every detail is relevant. And please note, although everything I have documented is factual, the case was never solved and has likely gone cold since this happened more than 10 years ago. Now, back in 2007, I found myself working as a bartender at a now closed pub in my hometown. Not a job I particularly liked, but it did pay the bills. At this time, they had hired a new kitchen manager that we simply knew as Kearney. He was a pleasant enough man, mostly keeping to himself, but always stayed late to help the barman do our closing duties, so we all liked him for that. New in town, Kearney had yet to find a place of permanent residence, and I had recently lost my tenants, so somebody suggested that he ask me. He was considerably older than the tenants I usually took in, but having had a streak of bad luck with tenants my own age, I thought an older man with a nice steady job may be a shift in the right direction, so I agreed. Kearney wasted no time and followed me home that very same night, but only he wasn't alone. Enter Lawrence, the boyfriend of Kearney. Honestly, I hadn't even realized he was gay to that point, but it was water off my back regardless. Looking back now, what really should have bothered me though was Lawrence's appearance. He looked like he had been sleeping on the street, rather appropriately as I would later find out. So Kearney moved in and Lawrence was there a lot too, and it was easy to know when, due to his mobile ringtone sounding like the quacking of a duckling. Kearney had some habits that were rather noteworthy to this story. In particular, one, he basically never closed his bedroom door. No matter what he was doing in there, it was always open. And two, although he was a very heavy smoker, he never once smoked inside the house. So Kearney had been living there for about 2 weeks when I had come down with an awful case of pink eye. This being highly contagious, I was given leave of absence from my bartending job and therefore decided to go wait it out at my sister's for a few days. Apparently, I didn't mind giving it to her. Sorry, sis. So the day my sister was scheduled to come pick me up, no, I couldn't drive yet, I took a casual stroll into the bar that Ben, my good friend from high school and at the time coworker, and I had been building into my house, and something caught my eye. All of our liquor bottles were completely empty. Now, those who had been frequenting my house at that time would know that we weren't just talking about 1 or 2 bottles of brandy here and there, but bottles of whiskey, gin, vodka, all kinds of stuff. Basically, it was a fully stocked bar that could host a pretty big party without requiring much in the way of additions. So I called Kearney in and asked him what he knew about this, receiving feedback that Lawrence and he had been on a slight drinking binge. Those were the actual words that he used, and it left me both furious about the thousands of worth of stock they had drunk out, but also slightly impressed that he was actually still alive. Regardless, I said that I would be dealing with this upon my return. So I'm with my sister for a few days, and on Friday I get a call from my local police department asking me if I know a Conrad Schultz. Ironically enough, I didn't. They finally add that I will probably know him as Kearney and that I should probably come down to the station, as they had just arrested his boyfriend trying to sell my camera equipment. So my sister rushes me back home, where all of my camera equipment was on display at the police station. It's on this visit that I'm informed that Lawrence was actually a Navy SEAL who got dishonorably discharged before turning to a life of crime and now has a rap sheet longer than the length of a chapter book. The kicker was that both he and Kearney were actually homeless men who had met at the Salvation Army. So Lawrence is in jail and my sister drops me off at home, more or less the same time that Kearney gets home as well. Based on Kearney's account of what happened, he had turned Lawrence in himself, so he couldn't allow Lawrence to do to me what he was trying to do, I guess. Although I had appreciated his sacrifice, I still told Kearney that he would have to go, having been the overall cause of all of this. However, not wanting to leave the homeless man, while homeless, I gave him until the end of the month to make other arrangements. So Monday comes, and having just completed a staff meeting, I walk home to encounter a very much free Lawrence, sitting on the sidewalk across from my house, watching it. I confront Lawrence as to why he's there, and he tries to apologize before begging for money. Rather out of character, really. I dismiss him without giving him a cent. Now, I go back to the previous night. See, I had mentioned the staff meeting for a reason, as it was at that meeting where we had gotten a rather sizable list of liquor bottles that had gone missing from the storeroom, leaving us all suspecting each other. I, however, would not have to wait long to figure out who the real culprit was, as a few days later I opened the garage bin in my kitchen to see the missing bottles, all empty and staring back at me. I decided to sit on this information for the time being, although I did photograph it, just in case I needed it as evidence later. I had also called over Ben to inform him of the developments. As this was quickly becoming a detective game, we decided to enter Kearney's room to search for further evidence. Nothing of vast significance in there, with one exception: 2 single photographs of Lawrence. Before he had turned into a homeless version of Lex Luthor or Charles Xavier. Actually, there were several of Lawrence's things still there, but as Lawrence had spent a lot of time there before the incident, I accepted this as normal. Now, I should also add that I had mentioned Lawrence's release to Kearney and had told him that if I even suspected that they were still seeing each other, I would throw him out of the house myself. Only a few days would pass before this came into play. On this particular night, I had been bartending again, and Kearney had constantly been stopping by the bar to help himself to drop glasses half full of wine, and half full of Coke, which he would go drink outside the restaurant. We confronted him about this, but as he correctly pointed out, he was still a manager, and we had no right to tell him what he could or could not do. On his 4th trip, however, I had grown suspicious and decided to follow him outside, where I encountered Lawrence sitting outside, sharing the half Coke / half wine concoctions with Kearney. This made me mad, so the next day I returned to the restaurant with my photographic evidence, which I handed over to the general manager, who was also kind of a friend of mine. Although I hadn't physically seen it, I had heard the confrontation through the office door when he fired Kearney. Kearney left, obviously upset, and apparently had no idea that I had been the one who had turned him in. So we had closed early that night and I was walking home, going past the high school. I saw Kearney coming from the opposite direction. He walked past me, literally only saying 2 words: "I'm scared," before disappearing into the darkness. That would be the last time that I would ever physically lay my eyes on Conrad Schultz. So we reached the final week before Kearney's eviction was to take place. Ben had come to stay with me for that duration, as we both wanted to monitor the situation and make sure that nothing else happened. It was in this week that Kearney's behavior suddenly changed. He was constantly smoking in his room, and his door was closed 24/7. In fact, neither Ben nor I had caught so much as a glimpse of him in that entire last week, which we hadn't thought much of at that time. So, the day of Kearney's eviction comes around. Ben has gone home for a few hours, and I finally hear Kearney's bedroom door open. Somebody walks out of the room, opens the front door, and leaves. followed him outside, but somehow he had already completely disappeared. What was left, though, was his house keys, indicating that he obviously wasn't planning to come back. I took a look at the keys, noticing something strange. Although the correct keys were all in the keychain, there were also several that weren't mine. Why would he leave me the wrong keys? I remember thinking as I walked into his room. His room was a shock, not because of the state it was in. The two had broken his bed in an act of wild monkey sex, but I had known about that already. As I said, he never closed his damn door, but more that he had literally left almost all of his belongings behind with one exception. You guessed it. The 2 photos of Lawrence. Upon further investigation, I suddenly realized that all traces of Lawrence ever being there had completely vanished, with all of Kearney's stuff left behind. There was one thing Lawrence left behind though, his duckling ringtone, which, it turned out, hadn't been so much a ringtone as an actual duckling, which now strolled around casually in the vacant bedroom, and we named him Neville, by the way. So Ben returns and gets updated about the developments, both of us thinking the way he left was rather weird. Of course, the whole thing had been weird. It was only when I asked the infamous question that all of this became a conspiracy theory. Did you ever actually see Kearney in this last week? It was to our shock that we realized that neither of us had. Suddenly putting puzzle pieces together. The changing habits, Neville the duck, the wrong keys, only Lawrence's stuff being gone. It was to great discomfort that we both asked the question, who had really been living in our house this last week? During the next few days, Ben and I went on a mission, searching the town, crawling into drain pipes, trying to find any trace of Kearney's whereabouts, but they all added up to nothing. Conrad Schultz had simply vanished off the face of the earth. That wasn't the case with Lawrence, though. No, he was still around, having made some new homeless friends. We encountered him several times begging on the streets. I asked him every time, "Where's Kearney, Lawrence?" But he just acted like he had never heard of him. The last time I would see Lawrence was across from work, attempting to break into a car. I had called the police on him, and they had arrived rather quickly, arresting him on the spot. While he was being led away by the police, I shouted after him one last time, "Where is Kearney, Lawrence?" But he just ignored me and let the cops drag him away. The next day, I filed a police report, reporting Kearney as a missing person and suggesting that Lawrence may know something about it, but nothing ever came of it. So, Lawrence, I don't know if you did something to Kearney or not, but if you did, let's not meet again. Hey Reddit, I'm a long-time user, but due to the nature of this situation, I decided to use a throwaway. Trigger warning for baby death, abuse, stalking, etc. Also, apologies if this isn't the right sub, we just need answers. My girlfriend's mother is a long-time heroin user and has been in and out of jail for my girlfriend's whole life. When she lived with her mother and her mother's husband, she witnessed physical abuse and drug activity. She was forced to move out at a very young age in order to stay alive. She thought her mother was finally clean when her mom announced her pregnancy. After getting over the initial shock, my girlfriend then decided to be supportive of her mom since she thought she was clean. That was until her mom overdosed while pregnant. She decided to cut all contact at that point. My girlfriend is also a mandated reporter and last year reported her mom and her mom's husband to the state since she knew it wasn't a safe situation for the baby. The baby died in their house not even a month after due to an overdose with signs of physical abuse. My girlfriend's mother was arrested for the murder of her baby and other charges. Her husband was arrested for child endangerment and other charges very recently. At first, the judge did not grant either of them bail. Eventually, her husband was granted bail, which he posted. We did not know this until recently, which helped us put some of the pieces together. My girlfriend and I like to sit outside of her house in the car and just chat or listen to music. Recently, there have been black cars around my girlfriend's house. She is also frequently being followed by black cars when she drives me home. It's the same couple of black cars that do this. They're not just random ones. At first, we thought we were just paranoid since everybody was still in jail, but when we found out that the husband was out of jail, we began to doubt our insanity. The first major thing happened after my girlfriend and I went on a dinner date. Got home after dark and sat in her car for about 45 minutes before we noticed the same black car passing by us every few minutes. After 10 minutes of that, a different car drove towards us, flicking its high beams on when it got close enough for us to see who was inside. It swerved into the oncoming lane, and I genuinely thought I was going to hit the passenger side of the car. It sped away and we ran inside. After that, we started noticing the black cars more and more. This past Wednesday morning, around 3 a.m.-ish, the same distinct black van that we had been seeing pulled up outside my house. This was weird because my girlfriend and I live about 30 minutes from each other in two separate cities. A man got out of the van and shined a flashlight through my yard, scanning it almost entirely. He shined the flashlight up at the window I was sitting at, kept it there for a second, then walked 30 feet to an empty driveway, scanning around there for 20 seconds before getting in the van and peeling away. The windows were ice covered and frozen, so I couldn't make out the specifics of the van, but it was strange. A few nights later, my girlfriend and I spent some time hanging out in the car when we spotted a black van hiding behind another parked car further up the street. We could only see one headlight, but it creeped by us as we sat in the car. My girlfriend lives between two dead-end streets. Think of a very blocky U, and she lives in the middle of that. The van went up the first dead end, four-way on, and sat for a few minutes before turning around and driving almost into another lane of traffic to get close to us. It then went up the other dead end and stayed put. We thought it was weird that the van didn't just back out of the first dead end, instead opting to drive all the way up the narrow street and turn around. After a few minutes, we call a friend and recount this story just to get an extra opinion. While my girlfriend was talking to our friend, I got out of the car to go for a cigarette and to see how far away the van was. I walked up the dead end that the van was on for about 15 feet before getting the worst gut feeling I've ever gotten. Across the street from me was a black mass, which was darker than the darkness around it. I decided to just turn around and rush my girlfriend into the house. Later that night, we heard a bang coming from downstairs, followed by what sounded like a boot on wooden stairs. We locked the bedroom door, and I sat against the door with a baseball bat, hoping to barricade it. A few minutes later, we heard a car door slam before the sound of tires squeezing and a car driving away. Our initial idea was maybe it came from the TV, but we had paused it, and the TV in the next room is never loud enough to feel real. When I went downstairs an hour later to get water, there was nothing damaged or missing. We theorized that maybe it was the sound of the front door trying to be opened, even though it was dead bolted. My girlfriend's exterior wall doesn't face the road, and we've never heard car sounds before. It is, however, next to a private driveway, and sometimes we'll hear her grandparents' car door close, or the neighbors backing out. The next day, I was shoveling the sidewalks at my girlfriend's house, an activity that took about 20 minutes, and I saw the same black Chevy Silverado with mud streaks on the tailgate. It circled the block about 4 times. I was able to see the silhouette of the man driving through the passenger side window, and each time it was the same man and same truck. My girlfriend lives in a small town, and we were able to catalog the neighborhood cars. The black van and truck are abnormal. Our theory is that somebody is trying to scare my girlfriend into not testifying, or flat out making sure neither of us have the ability to testify. We really just need some more opinions. Are we just paranoid, or is this something we should actually be worried about? Do you think these are just weird coincidences?